in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr.
are not
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome to the show. Very much appreciate you joining me. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock in the morning. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, and we are the home of common sense. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or your connected device, thank you very much indeed for joining me. Lots to talk about today. Yeah. Do you think? Going to be talking, of course, about Donald Trump warning Iran to make peace quickly after the US conducted a series of devastating airstrikes on Tehran's nuclear facilities at the weekend. The US president boasted that the B-2 stealth bombers had completely and totally annihilated the Islamic State's underground atomic plant at Fordo, and warned that any retaliation by Iran would be the worst mistake they've ever made. Following the strikes, there have also been warnings of potential terror attacks in the UK by Iran, even though we weren't involved. Interesting today that both Keir Starmer yesterday and David Lammy today refusing to say whether or not they believe the attacks were legal or not. Just we weren't involved. No, because we're a bit irrelevant and also Iran, aren't we? I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Plus, just a little bit of a win for common sense. We like to have that occasionally. BBC News presenter Martin Croxall rejected woke gender-neutral language during a live broadcast, reporting advice for vulnerable people during the heat wave. Because, of course, we all need to have advice when it's hot, because otherwise we won't survive, because human beings would never survive in hot countries, ever, otherwise would they? But she used the term pregnant people, immediately correcting that to pregnant women with the roll of her eyes. Well done, Martine. Nice to know there's someone sane at the BBC. Plus, British businesses have been urged to rise up against the Deputy Prime Minister and Rayner's new employment laws. This is amid warnings of the devastating effects on the economy of those laws, which are currently going through the House of Lords. The Tories sent an open letter to business chiefs at the weekend, urging them to speak out against the radical plans, they say, or be sleepwalked into disaster. Now, if you haven't already logged on to our YouTube page, my YouTube page, not just the Talk one, but my own one, cunningly called, wait for it, the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Do hit subscribe. You can never miss a thing. If you haven't had a look, do just take a look right now. You can hit subscribe, as I say. You'll never miss a thing. And if you have to, brief step away, from the laptop while you're working from home in the garden, lovely weather for it today, bit cooler than the weekend. You won't miss anything. Anyway, it's great to have you on board, and it's great also, as always on a Monday, to have the brilliant Sam Armstrong, who's a commentator, to join us in the studio as well. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
An awful lot to talk about. I don't even know where to start. Where do we start? But the question I was tweeting this out over the weekend, and it's going to put into the audience, and of course love your thoughts on just general reactions to what has happened over the weekend and where we go from the future. But I'm asking, first of all, is the world a more or less safe place after Donald Trump's devastating strikes on Iran's nuclear sites? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you think that the likes of Keir Starmer and David Lammy should actually say, yeah, it was legal, we support it, yeah, you can negotiate some things, but you can't negotiate other things, largely with insane religious extremists, which is what the Iranian regime is. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the world is a safer place? Do you think the world is a less safe place now? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. What's your answer to that question, Sam?
Categorically 100% safer today than we were a week ago. Those bombers were dropping our freedom, our security from 40,000 feet onto those facilities. Iran has been totally and categorically clear what it wants to obtain these weapons for, which is to attack us, to destroy us, to injure and hurt our allies in the region, and to do that with impunity that comes from that nuclear guarantee. And that is something that we could not countenance, could never countenance. When a regime like Iran tells you that you are the enemy, when it says repeatedly that it wants to destroy what it calls the little evil, which is its term for the UK, you listen to it. They've been clear, they hate us, and quite why our Prime Minister seems unable to say the same about them, I don't know.
And that is the most extraordinary thing, isn't it? I wrote a column for The Sun on Friday morning. So look, by this time you read this, we could well be, at war. The American president at that point said it would be within 2 weeks, because it was actually within 2 days by the time the actual airstrikes happened on those 3 nuclear sites. But I quoted Maya Angelou, who's a fantastic, great American poet, and she said, when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. I don't think the clues were that subtle from Iran. Very, very clear. And again, the fact that there are so many people, largely on the left, but also, by the way, some lunatics on the right, who all of whom are as insane and as useful idiots and frankly as immoral as each other. Basically, this idea that Israel's attack on Iran was unprovoked. What, apart from all the provocation? They justify somehow the October 7th massacre in Israel and the taking of hostages because the provocation from Israel over all those years in terms of taking over Palestinian territory, the occupation, even though it had ended in 2005, everything that happened on the West Bank justifies what happened on October the 7th. That justifies Hezbollah attacking the north of Israel. That's all justified. That was not an unprovoked attack. That was provoked. Israel's response, totally unacceptable, apparently, even though clearly a defensive war to take on extremists on their border, on both Hezbollah and Hamas. And then Iran, as you say, repeatedly, they funded the Hamas, they funded Hezbollah, they funded the Houthi rebels. They have attacked American air bases as well as Israeli civilians. It is simply a miracle of the Iron Dome that so many Israeli civilians have not died up to this point. Far too many in the last few days, in the last week certainly. And I just find it utterly impossible to believe that the people on both the left and the right who are saying this was an unprovoked attack by America to defend not just Israel, but to defend Western interests as well and our allies, that was unprovoked. They either been living, I don't know, inside the Fordo nuclear bunker under the mountain 300 metres under and unable to see any news for the last 20 years, or they're just immoral liars, Which do you think it is?
Well, never ever forget that literally the first ever act of the Iranian regime was to kidnap and kill Americans at their own embassy that were based in Tehran. And ever since, it has been the principal sponsor of terrorism throughout the entire region. Yeah. Let's be clear. Fanatical Islam did not begin or end with the Iranian regime. It was around before, it will go on afterwards. Yeah. But Iran puts turbochargers on it everywhere that it finds us, and all of the regimes, all of the terrorist groups, all of the enemies that we have faced over there and indeed over here on our streets have found shelter, support, succour from that regime. Yeah. When we attack Iran, we are attacking a devout, avowed, committed enemy of ours, and we should thank President Trump, in my opinion. We should be sending him our thanks and our gratitude for doing the job for us. And I can only be embarrassed and ashamed that my country has, by virtue of the Prime Minister that we have and the legal advisors he has surrounded himself with, been so reduced on the global stage that we aren't even a factor anymore. Yeah. I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, I'm humiliated, and that's the damage that this man has done in a year.
I couldn't agree with you more, and it is extraordinary that Keir Starmer has done some, little interviews, made some statements, and he obviously thinks he can get away with just saying, and read out some number 10 that yes, he's had a conversation with Donald Trump, reiterates we need to de-escalate, all this talk. He was definitely not in the loop, not involved and not in the loop. The fact that the Brits, were told clearly once the planes were in the air, and by the way, can we just talk briefly about the extraordinary missions? This was basically, was this or was this not the plot of Top Gun 2?
It was absolutely the plot.
Absolutely. They probably got the idea, with the B-2 stealth bombers, 14 bunker buster bombs flown. The fact that there was this decoy flight to Guam, they're moving the flights to Guam. There may be action in the next 2 weeks. Meanwhile, a few hours later, off we go. They fly in the other direction. 36-hour round trip, 18 hours each in the air. It's an extraordinary mission. Now, whether or not it has completely destroyed Iran's nuclear facilities is now questionable, because there's lots of evidence that actually a lot of stuff was removed from these sites in advance of this. So, and the technology and the knowledge, the know-how is still there. So I don't think we have solved this problem forever. But it is extraordinary that we weren't involved, we couldn't be trusted. I think that is quite a statement about the state of this government. And no wonder, when David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has been doing the media rounds this morning, and he refused to say if the US military action against Iran was the right thing to do. Very, very clear question he was asked. Do you think, was it the right thing to do? He said, I have said that we weren't involved in the military action. Not an answer to the question, asked it again. If it was the right thing to do, he said, what I've said is that ultimately this can only be dealt with in diplomacy. Go through various other questions, and then asked once again, did he believe the US strikes illegal or legal? Well, we weren't involved, said David Lammy. It is for the Americans to discuss those issues. And yet, as was pointed out by the interviewer, Britain gives judgment on many different things, like whether or not an airstrike on Ukraine was legal or not legal. Whether Hamas's attack on Israel was. We give our views for tuppence, but we don't know. The man who represents this country abroad, David Lammy, does not know whether those airstrikes were legal or illegal. But the only answer to that must be that he thinks they're illegal, or has been advised by Lord Homer, the Attorney General, who's wrong about everything, they're illegal, and they don't want to say so because they don't want to upset Trump. On whatever basis, I'm embarrassed.
It's pathetic. It's totally and utterly pathetic. Firstly, this illegal thing.
Yeah, it's irrelevant.
I'm sorry, but when it comes to matters of defending my country, a lawyer is the last person I bleeding well want to speak to, totally. Right? Deal with that afterwards. When it comes to whether or not Iran, this regime, should have a nuclear weapon, I don't care what the lawyers say, I want to deal with it. Secondly, this can only be resolved through diplomacy. What a load of total unmitigated balderdash.
20 years.
It is nonsense. The sum total we have got for 20 years of negotiation is Iran moving markedly closer to developing the bomb. This will not be solved by diplomacy. It will not. I want Iran to be bombed. I don't want it because I've got a bloodlust or because I'm particularly aggressive, or I am happy about the thought of American or indeed British pilots, as I wish there were involved, putting themselves in danger. I believe that because you can, as Israel and America are showing, bomb this nuclear program out of existence. It is totally foreseeable that we can remove it by military means. In my view, the military route is very, very, very much the right way to go about dealing with it.
It's the only way of dealing with lunatics. You can't negotiate with complete and utter lunatics who genuinely think that their mission in life is to not just kill all Jews, destroy and annihilate Israel, but then take on America and Britain. We are on the list, people. We can't go, don't look at us, don't involve us. We're very much already involved. We don't have a choice about it. What do you make of the battles within Labour then over this? And obviously Keir Starmer, not that he's corporately not wanting to offend, the president in America, but also trying to deal with things here. And we've got this view that Palestine Action is about to become a prescribed terror group, but not in time to stop the pro-Palestine Action protest at Westminster today. The Met Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, said he is shocked, but unable to act. This was, of course, the organisation which broke into RAF Bryce Norton, although not very different. I think I could break into RAF Bryce Norton and damage 2 military planes with red paint. What do you make of that protest being allowed to go ahead and the prescription?
Well, firstly, let's be clear, it's just yet more sign of how pathetic our country has been rendered in the last few years, that we can't stop this bunch of, unwashed loony
Well, they've been
activists.
Joined by the eco-activists as well. It's like Greta as well. Everyone, this is the latest bandwagon.
It's absolutely right. Getting our base, that we cannot prescribe people in time, and frankly that prescription or banning this group is our only response in the first place. Let me be very clear. We used to believe that an attack on British military assets was about the most serious thing in this country that you could do. Never forget, until 1998, burning down a ship on a Royal Navy base was still an act of treason. It's still a hangable offence. That was one of the last things for which we abolished the death penalty. It doesn't get more serious. These people are traitors to our country. If you attack a British military asset, you deserve to be hauled up before the Old Bailey by the end of that day and punished as severely as possible. We haven't identified who it was. We certainly haven't arrested them. There have been no charges brought. We haven't been able to ban the group. We've been dilly-dallying and talking for a week. And you asked, about the battle within Labour. Labour seems to be incapable of even saying the word Israel. It seems incapable of saying, we stand with America, our closest ally in the world, against Iran. Why? Because Keir Starmer is, and I regret to say this, Keir Starmer is worried about the extensive problem the Labour Party now has with winning constituencies in certain inner cities because of the very, very large Muslim vote, some of which is regrettably harbouring extreme views on this topic. Yeah,
absolutely. It is such a big concern. There's so much more I want to talk about today. And coming up, we are going to be talking to Hamish de Bretton-Gordon. He's a former British Army colonel who was also, basically in charge of of WMD in the Middle East. So we're going to talk to him as well, his expertise there, because of course, nuclear weapons are amongst WMDs. I'd love to hear from you though. Do get in touch. All your thoughts on this. On the operation. Should we have been involved? Are you worried that we weren't involved? The pussyfooting around by David Lammy and Keir Starmer, not saying whether they think it was legal or illegal. So, we just need to get back to the table. Do you think you can negotiate with people? I don't think you should. If we have an official policy, we don't negotiate with terrorists. Hamas are terrorists. Apparently, we were supposed to negotiate with them. Qatar harbouring terrorists. That we consider them our friends. And here we are saying we're not in favour of regime change in Iran. Aren't we? I would have thought we would want to be in favour of regime change in Iran. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
The Iranian foreign minister says he's going to meet Putin in Moscow to talk about this. What's your analysis of that?
Iran is helping President Putin in his assault and his illegal war in Ukraine, as we know. And that also is happening through the ballistic missile usage and the stockpiles that come from Russia. President Trump has been telegraphing this message very clearly to Iran. It was during those talks that we all discovered through the IAEA that Iran was basically enriching nuclear material at an unprecedented rate.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:21 is the time. Looking forward to getting to your calls already. Lots of calls on the switchboard. 0244 499 1000. Your thoughts on where we are with Iran, American policy, British policy, what's going on at home. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Just to bring you up to date, the Palestine Action has been banned from protesting outside Parliament today. They're the pro-Palestinian, obviously, organisation, anti-Britain, let's just call them what they are, who have damaged those two military planes at RAF Bryce Norton ahead of the weekend. But Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Chief, has said that he was frustrated. The group was planning a demonstration today. They've been able to impose the exclusion zone around Parliament, with protesters facing arrest if they enter the area. But they said any demonstration essential under by the group cannot begin before 12, must end by 3, so putting limitations on it. They're likely to prescribe that group later today in Parliament, just to get you up to date on that. Right, well, let's go to my first guest on the line today, and that's Hamish de Bretton-Gordon, OBE. You'll know him, of course, as a former British Army colonel, regular on the show, but also a former commander of British and NATO nuclear defence forces, and very much involved in the hunts for WMDs in the Middle East. Very good morning to you, Hamish.
Hi, good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to put the first question to you, is the question that was put to David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, today repeatedly. Was the US military action against Iran the right thing to do?
Yeah, I think it was exactly the right thing to do. And particularly the action that's been described in great detail everywhere yesterday. This was the massive ordnance penetrator attacks on key sites, the 3 key sites where we know that enrichment's happening: Isfahan, Nuntaz and Fordo, the big deep ground one. So we know the Iranians told us that they'd enriched uranium to 60%. They told us they were planning to make a bomb. My assessment, looking at everything now, is actually they probably can't do it. I think the site, it's been a very successful attack. And the final thing in this, we know that the Supreme Leader is hiding underground at the moment, but he also knows that there is probably a crosshair of a mop on him. And, he might well be, I think this is what Trump is alluding to. So absolutely the right thing to do as it stands at the moment, whatever other people are saying. And I know there are lots of experts saying lots of contradictory things, but I don't think the Iranians can produce a nuclear device, a nuclear weapon of any credible status for probably several years now.
Well, this is the thing. The debate had been, wasn't it? Were they credibly close to getting a nuclear weapon? We know they were building the rockets. We know they'd enriched uranium. That's all beyond doubt. And they said they wanted to annihilate Israel. I managed to put those 3 things together. I think a 6-year-old could put those 3 things together and realise there was a threat. But we also know that they'd got, the point where they got to is actually that's the most of the hard work, and getting from 60% to 90% to actually put it on the put it on the ballistic missile and fire it is less work. But even if it's not a complete and utter destruction of their nuclear capability, and they could always just buy it in again in the future and get that expertise back. It doesn't disappear, does it? Even with the deaths of lots of leading scientists. The point is, they're not going to be an immediate nuclear threat to Israel, the Middle East, or indeed the West. Why do you think so many people, including our own Prime Minister, our own Foreign Secretary, and many on the left in this country, and indeed actually many on the right in America, interestingly, and here, are saying, look, this is crazy, this is going to lead to World War III. It's not made the world a safer place, as you appear to believe, and certainly I believe. Do you think they've got an argument?
I think a lot of people are conflating what happened in 2003 when American forces and British forces, ground forces, went in to deal with Saddam's weapons of mass destruction. I think we've learned a hell of a lot from this, and this operation shows exactly that we have. I don't think there's any plans of the Americans or the Israelis or the British or anybody to put boots on the ground. So that's what people are conflating it. We talked about my time in Syria when I was really cross that nobody got involved to help there, because unfortunately politicians at the time thought it was 2003 Iraq and we'd get dealt into it, but it was so different. So I think that is what people are making the mistake. And some people are saying, oh well, they could get some enriched uranium and blow it up. Well, not really. I mean, Islamic State tried years and years and years to get highly enriched uranium to create a small nuclear device and never achieved it. So I think this is avoiding those fears about Iraq 2003, and it's really up to the Iranians now to as Trump says, come and talk peace and let's get a peace deal. So I don't think there's any way that we are going to put boots on the ground in Iran and fight as we did in Iraq in 2000.
I mean, it's very, very different, quite apart from the actual size of the country and the size of the regime in Iran. Do you feel that I mean, Donald Trump has been tweeting about, hey, maybe there should be a regime change. MAGA, he's tweeted, make Iran great again. Now, this is something that, he's previously said they won't do. Certainly, Britain not talked about. Israel has hinted at. Would it be in our interest if there were regime change, or is it a case of be careful what you wish for? We saw what happened when we toppled Saddam Hussein, when we toppled the Taliban briefly in Afghanistan. We saw the rise of in Syria, of ISIS and Al Qaeda, but we also saw what happened in Libya, the absolute chaos there, the migrant crisis in the Mediterranean, and subsequently for us, big part of that is that chaos and the organised criminals and the warlords taking over in Libya. Should we be careful what we wish for in terms of ousting this regime?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, this is not really my area of expertise, but I've just come back from Syria, where Assad's toppled, and crikey, I know that I was running around there when the terrorists and the others were trying to kill me and the likes, and it is a completely different country now. When it comes to regime change, I'm sure the rank and file who have had a miserable life in Iran with the rule of the Ayatollahs and the mullahs for the last 30 years would prefer a more democratic type of country rather than a extreme religious state. So who knows? But let's see. But I do think that what Trump is saying here is that he's got the supreme leaders in the crosshairs of a mob, and in order for that not to be fired, then they need to come and sort out some sort of peace.
Going to have to come to the table. And just in terms of, we've just heard reports on Iranian state TV that the nuclear facility of Fordow has been hit again, this time in an Israeli attack. That was, of course, the main target of the US bunker busting bombs. Just talk briefly, if you would, as a military man, about Operation Midnight Hammer, which was an extraordinary operation from the decoy bombers setting off to was it 36-hour round trip for the pilots. Talk us through how audacious this trip was.
Well, we've seen some pretty audacious military missions recently. Op Spider's Web, the Ukrainians attacking deep into Russia. Yep. We've seen also the Israeli mission to destroy Hezbollah with the exploding pages. Now, this is on a different level. These are the B-2s, the 7 B-2s that flew thousands of miles, dropped their 14 massive ordnance penetrators, which are phenomenal weapons. But also, it was supported by a submarine firing 76 cruise missiles. We understand lots of fighter jets. They went in and out and did this without the Iranians even knowing, without even any air defense lighting up, no jets taking off. And we've also heard today that the Israelis have taken out sort of the remainder of the Iranian Air Force. So an extraordinary demonstration of power. And I think what it does shows to the world. And hopefully Putin is sitting in his lair in the Kremlin now trembling. And hopefully, I'm very focused on Ukraine. And I hope President, if he's prepared to do this sort of thing,
yes,
support Israel, then us in the UK, our big threat is the Russians and what's happening in Ukraine. And maybe this is just a marker that will get Putin to the ceasefire table as well.
Yeah, bearing in mind, of course, Iran has been helping with drones and the like for Russia in that Ukraine war. Hamish Breton-Gordon, always great to have you on. He's a former British Army colonel and former commander of the British and NATO nuclear defence forces. He knows what he's talking about. He said it was the right thing to do, Sam Armstrong. And I think this is a key thing. It is fascinating. We've had this ever since, 2003 in the Iraq War. And look, there were lots of problems with what happened with the Iraq War. Obviously, we'd certainly be agreed on that. And there was a lot of lies in the dossier. I never accepted the Hutton report that there weren't lies in that 45-minute claim and all of that. But at the end of the day, there are right and wrong things to do. And everyone gets very caught up. We're in a very sort of lawyery sort of world where, well, if the UN says this, it's okay, and if they don't, it's not okay. Whereas, okay, so the UN, where the 5 permanent security members include China and Russia, excuse me for not giving 2 hoots what the UN thinks about anything, and they're also in blatantly anti-Israeli, anti-Semitic body now. The lawyers say it's okay, it's fine, but if they don't say it's okay, it's immoral. It's about, fundamentally, it's about defence. It's about power, yep. and it's about morality. And at the end of the day, those are the things that will decide what international action is taken. And it will be, post the event, they can justify things or not justify things. But the notion that the international law exists in the ether without being backed by power and right and wrong is a nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sorry to break it to you, but a bunch of fancy diplomats in New York or lawyers in Luxembourg are not what keeps you safe.
Yeah.
The people of this country, the people of the Western world, are kept safe by awesome military might, the most powerful armed forces ever assembled in the history of humanity.
Our big mate over there.
And it is backed up in our country's case with the ultimate guarantee, which is if you attack this country, we can literally wipe you off the planet. That's what keeps us safe.
Yeah.
And lawyers,
wait a minute, not the EU?
Not the EU.
I thought it was the EU that kept the peace. Everyone keeps telling us that.
Not any of these bodies, not this notional, abstract idea of international law, which, by the way, basically doesn't really exist anyway. It's just a collection of agreements between individual countries. What keeps us safe is our armed forces, and we have lost the sense that this is a really dangerous world that we live in, and there are really bad people
that you can't negotiate with.
You can't negotiate with, you can't wish away, and you can't pretend they don't exist. At some point, we need to get real about the world that we now live in, which has got much, much, much more dangerous than any of us are really thinking about or got into our heads yet, which is that there are a bunch of countries all coming together that may well, in the next few years, be wealthier, be tougher, be stronger than the West, and they are hell-bent on taking over this world and running it in the way that they wish to, and not the way that we do.
That's on the military front, but I want to talk later in the show more about the home front and like Palestine Actions and all that, and some of the demonstrations on the streets, and frankly the likes of David Lammy and Lord Hermer, the Attorney General, who I think are just as dangerous on the home front. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to take your calls up next. We're also going to be talking to the brilliant Claire Fox as well, the independent peer, in a few moments as well. But do keep your calls coming in. We'll get to some straight away after the next break. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back to the show. 10:35 is the time. Let's get straight to your messages and calls coming in thick and fast. I'm asking, is the world more or less safe after Donald Trump's devastating strikes on Iran's nuclear sites? Tell us why they are. Tell us why they aren't. 0344 499 1000. You can text as well. Lots of texts and tweets coming in. Samuel says, far safer. A terrorist state has been brought to their knees. Much safer, says Diane. All we need now is to cut the head off the snake. Edmund says, from America first and no more forever wars to another neocon Israel first puppet. Oh, he got in all the key words. I had that one in my bingo. Yasmin says, less safe. Now we face retaliation by Iran. Now, this is the illusion that we didn't face retaliation from Iran anyway. The fact that we exist, Yasmin, is why Iran wants to kill us, OK? We don't have to do anything. We could say, Iran, we love you every single day. We can send them bunches of tulips every single day. They would still want to kill us, including you. I hate to break that to you. Ian says, more safe, and anyone else saying otherwise is a useful idiot of the worst kind. Eddie says, the head of the snake is slowly being decapitated. The Iranian people deserve to be free. And Marvin says, more safe. Trump actually dealt with a raving loony Islamist threat that European weak leaders just bow down to. The UK in particular is now utterly spineless. Yeah, I don't think I could disagree with a word of that, Marvin. Let's go to Christine, who's on the line now in Derby. Hello, Christine. What do you want to say?
Good morning, Julia.
Good morning.
I am feeling much safer this morning with what Mr. Trump has done. Thank you, Mr. Trump, from the world, for making us safer. I am so ashamed of our puppet Prime Minister. At one time, we were a force to be reckoned with, and we were kept in the loop by everything. Why would Trump keep him in the loop? You can't be trusted. He likes terrorists. And this march that's going to go on today, I am appalled. And this will be another nail that we won't be in on what's happening in the world.
And this is the real concern, isn't it? The idea, I mean, again, there was this idea that people weren't going to be able, other Western leaders weren't going to be able to trust Donald Trump, and because he'll just put stuff on Truth Social and post it publicly and make a remark. And that is a concern. But it does appear that, we were told, I mean, Britain's saying, well, we were told, we did know in advance, but we weren't part of it. Right. But let's face it, this was after the planes were in the air, isn't it? This is like, oh, by the way, in 10 minutes' time, FYI, this is what's happening. They obviously don't trust us.
They don't trust us, and I actually don't trust them. So why?
No. What did you make of David Lammy this morning? I read this out. This interview.
I thought it was horrendous.
Absolutely. I mean, was it the right thing to do? I've said we weren't involved in the military action. I mean, I wasn't involved in the military action. I don't struggle in saying whether it was the right or wrong thing to do. You weren't I'm assuming you weren't a trained B-2 stealth bomber pilot.
No, I wish I was sometimes.
Oh, don't. Among the things, I'm not allowed a gun or a stealth bomber for obvious reasons. But this thing, you don't have any trouble giving your view on it?
No, certainly not. I mean, I have to declare I stand with Israel. Totally, since October. Well,
why wouldn't you? It's our only democratic ally in the Middle East. Why wouldn't we stand with Israel?
And it seems that this government is hard pressed to say that. And he mumbles about, because of the fact, let's face it, he is a terrorist lover. We know that.
You think he's a terrorist lover? Come on, back that up. Come on.
Yeah, I back that up to the fact that they think that they can negotiate with terrorists.
That doesn't mean you're a terrorist lover, but yeah, I think he's weakly. I think he comes from a strain of sort of human rights lawyer where they think you can discuss everything with everyone and everything can be negotiated and it's a load of nonsense. You can't negotiate with Islamist lunatics.
In this world that we stand today, you have to stand up for what you believe in. We don't know what he believes in. We just don't know because he doesn't come out and say it. He sits on the fence and we've got to go for peace now. You can't get peace from these people. I mean, the only thing that we've got to watch, and I can't remember what it is, but the channel where all the goods come through.
Homo straights, yeah.
Yeah, I think they might retaliate there. But, of course, that would then involve the whole of the world, wouldn't it?
Yeah, was it 20% of the world's oil? But also it would really damage Iran's economy. So, that's their choice. Fascinating. I'm very convinced, Christine, that you know more about this than the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, which is a bit of a concern to me. Christine, fantastic call. Thank you very much. Let's go to Sean, who is in Northampton. Sean, where do you stand on this?
Oh, I'm with you all the way. I'll be in there bombing them now. Personally, I'd take the place out. We've been waiting for this now for like 30 years. It's the only way we're ever going to have any safety. Iran is just like a scab on humanity, I'm afraid. So we need to take it out. But anyway, apart from that, what I wanted to say, I think they're missing a hell of a morality issue here, because I think there are millions of Iranians that are probably sitting in Iran now thinking, come on, America, please get rid of this lot of nutcases so we can go back to having some kind of life of our own. Yeah. And I think when Starmer and people like that who try and procrastinate towards it, you can liaise with people, like you've said so many times this morning, liaise with the imams and the Ayatollah. They'll tell you whatever you want to hear until they've got their bomb. And I just can't believe that Starmer, who's had such a bad year, he's pathetic, he's awful, he's not jumping on the American bandwagon now. At least try and make himself look like a statesman, because all he's done so far is picked Donald Trump's papers up, isn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, again, I did actually feel sorry for him there, because of course someone had to pick up the papers and he'd look a bit weird if he didn't pick them up, and I don't think Donald Trump probably could at his age bend down and pick them up, but it just it's going to haunt him, that, not as much as taking the knee for BLM in 2020, but still. But this is the thing, it's just, as you're right, I mean, Iranians may want regime change. I mean, we don't know exactly how many people, but as a general rule, if a regime has to be as repressive as the Iranian regime is to its people, odds are it's not very popular with its people.
I met a lot of young people. In the last year, I worked for a company in Northampton where immigrants under 18, supposedly, were housed and looked after. Yeah. And to 100% of those who'd come out of Iran or the Kurdish part of Iran, because of the sheer fact they can't have a brain, they can't say what they think, they can't think anything, they do as they're told. And for us over here, that even now, how bad it is, we've got all our freedoms, we can basically still say what we want. Mostly. I don't think people don't understand what it's like to live in that oppressive regime.
No. Well, then you get the idiots. I mean, India Willoughby, he's been tweeting about, claims to be a trans woman, and he's been tweeting about how, Iran is, he could go and live in Iran, the same as Britain, because, he'd be, as a trans-identified woman, he would, or trans-identified man, he believes he's a woman, that they're treated very well in Iran. And this is an absolute lie. Gay men are forced to basically undergo mutilation to live as if they are women, otherwise they're not, otherwise they'll be imprisoned or executed. And trans people are massively under attack in Iran. I mean, it's like the Queers for Palestine people. These people are delusional.
These people that are marching today really should now be rounded up and interned, in my view.
Really?
If they're scared, right, if they're now scared of upsetting... Let's be honest about it now, right? This is all about Starmer being scared to upset the Muslim vote in the UK. We all know that's a major part of this, right? If he's so scared that all these Muslims in the UK are the Ayatollah's supporter, then by virtue of the fact of that, they become our enemies too. So where are all the imams? Where are all the Muslims in this country saying free our brothers, free our sisters in Iran?
Wouldn't that be nice? Well, look, I don't hold individual people, regardless of religion, responsible for the actions of regimes or protest groups. So, but I understand the sort of the extrapolation. Again, that our foreign policy is now being completely, steered by a small minority ethnic and religious group in this country in a way that I think is very, very questionable. I
think it's absolutely dangerous, and I'm not advocating for violence, but I tell you can feel it everywhere you go. There's a new feeling since Trump's been in power. He's kind of abolished the fact that no one dares say anything, and you can feel it. Or you go to a pub, you go to a working man's club, people are now saying things they were never saying a year ago. People have had enough.
I couldn't agree with you more. The sea change is extraordinary. It really is. Sean, very interesting call. 2 fantastic calls. Hey, guys, they've set the bar high for you, but get in touch. 0344 499 1000. Sam Armstrong. I mean, just in terms of, like, you know, the Labour sort of fear of basically the home front vote, Labour is completely divided on this. And Keir Starmer, I mean, you know, he's not being a statesman on this because he's trying to do his whole all things to all men thing because he doesn't really believe in anything.
You can see it in literally everything this government does. The palpable fear of upsetting one community in particular. You can see it with the fact that we've got people who burn the Quran now criminalised. You can see it with the way that we saw two-tier justice last year. You can see it in our foreign policy. It is drippingly obvious. It is falling off every single action of this government, the stench, the whiff of playing out-and-out community politics in which one particular section of society is getting favoured in everything that is done by the government. I cannot believe that in this country that we have been reduced to that state in which one religious group is being out and out favoured by the government for purely naked political reasons.
And by the way, those so-called self-appointed community leaders are not doing that particular group of people living in our country a favour because that is going to create so much this community relations, these bad tensions that they talk so much about. That is going to be an issue. I agree with Sean. I think there's been a change and people are waking up and they are unhappy. And what I don't want is there to be, you know, anything, you know, attacks or animosity towards people because of any religion or ethnicity. That's not what this country is about. But this is a problem that's been created by the political media elite, pretending this isn't a problem in some parts of these communities already. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. 10:46 is the time. Up next, we'll put all those questions and plenty more to the wonderful Baroness Claire Fox.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed. History will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime the world's most dangerous weapons.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:49 is the time. Sam Armstrong's still with me, but joined right now by Baroness Claire Fox. She's an independent peer and director of the Academy of Ideas. A very good morning to you.
Good morning,
Thank you very much. I know I want to talk to you about lots of other things, but do you want to just come in on and answer the question about whether or not the US action was right or the wrong thing to do? A question which apparently our Foreign Secretary David Lammy couldn't answer this morning for the BBC.
It was the right thing to do.
There you are. See, David? It's really easy. It's just really easy. And moving on.
I could talk at great length, but we'll move on. Yes.
Let's move on. A lot of things I want to talk to you about, but including, and this sounds so sort of petty when we're dealing with, life and death and the threat of nuclear war and goodness knows what. But I think we were all a little bit excited when we saw on the BBC over the weekend a small moment of common sense when the news presenter Martine Croxall basically rejected woke gender-neutral language live on air. She was reporting advice for vulnerable people during heat waves. Again, the elderly and it was pregnant people, and she immediately corrected it to women with a roll of her eyes. I spotted it. J.K. Rowling spotted it, said my new favourite BBC presenter. No doubt she'll be roasted over the coals by BBC bosses, will she not, for having done that? But, these little moments of sanity are creeping in, aren't they, on the gender debate?
Yes, it does feel peculiar because we've just been talking about Iran, where women can have their eyes gouged out for showing a bit of hair or not wearing the right veil. So you can think, is this a bit indulgent? But actually, it was that eye roll that was magnificent from Martina. She corrected the language. She rolled her eyes. She has had to close her, turn off her account on X because she got so much abuse despite the support she got from J.K. Rowling and the rest of us. But I think that
that's why she got abuse.
Yeah, that's
so literally, factually correct. Pregnant people, yes, they're not people. They're a subset of people called women.
But the thing that's shocking is, of course, that the BBC had written that script for her. That was what was on the auto cue, and I think that there is a real problem, which is that the media have not caught up with reality in many instances, and are still insisting on this nonsense. And it's the same with many institutions like the NHS, like universities. Some people absolutely aggressively saying we refuse to implement the clarity that was brought by, for example, the Supreme Court recently.
I'm always very brave. I'm impressed with these organisations. Just very, very brave and say we simply won't obey the law. And good luck with that. What I would like is any of the organisations that say we won't obey the law, when they're taken to court, as they will be, and when they lose, as they inevitably will be, I want those people sacked, and I want them, rather than the taxpayer, because often these are public bodies, to be paying the bill. I know there's going to be a protest next weekend over one of the, a number of men identifying as trans, but clearly men, who were in women's prisons. Again, we've had that Supreme Court ruling for quite a few months now, and yet there are still men in women's prisons when that is completely against the law.
Yeah, well, I believe that there's going to be a protest in Parliament, I think tomorrow or Wednesday, of trans activists, the other way round, saying that their human rights are under threat, which is obviously a nonsense. Because actually, as we know, the Supreme Court did not take one right from one trans person at all. They clarified that, in fact, affording made-up rights to trans people actually deprives women of equal rights and of single-sex provision. So, there's a lot of protesting around. There's a lot still of people who are refusing to accept this. Yeah. But I think that Martina does deserve some credit for that correction, because it's also a sign of something else, which is there's more and more people with the confidence now to say what they've always thought, even in a professional capacity. But I do find it galling that mainstream media have still and carry on insist on this, bizarre,
using preferred pronouns.
Language. Exactly.
No, exactly. I have to say, when I write my song column, I always put a note to sub-editors if it's on the trans issue. Do not change any of my pronouns in this. They are biologically correct. What was interesting, judges, according to new guidance issued to judges, they no longer have to refer to criminal defendants by the gender of their choice. And this has happened repeatedly, where women who have been raped or sexually assaulted, and the male assailant is in the court, and when they give evidence, they are required, along with all the court people, this big bloke is standing standing there, and they're required to refer to her and she, and by some, made-up woman's name, and to refer to her penis. I mean, it's an abomination this has been forced to happen. But let's move on. There's other things I want to talk about. The Lords is dealing with a lot of things at the moment. We've got the assisted dying bill is going to be moving to the Lords. I'm interested to get your thoughts on that if we can. But also I want to talk about the new laws in terms of employment laws. And there is a big concern by a lot of businesses, and they've been written to by Tory chiefs over the weekend, basically saying you need to start standing up on this. This employment rights bill has gone through Parliament, gone through the Commons already. In terms of giving workers a hell of a lot more rights and a hell of a lot sooner from when they start work, as in on day one, not after 1 year or 2 years, various different rights, which many people are saying won't lead to workers getting better rights. It will lead to fewer workers getting jobs. What do you make of the bill?
Yeah, so the bill is finishing its committee stage tomorrow in the Lords. It's been a very, very long committee, I have to say, with quite a lot of us raising concerns. And I think it's like a lot of laws at the moment, which is if you hear that there's a bill that says, employment rights bill, enhancing employment rights, you think, oh, well, I'm for that. And I'm an old trade unionist, so I can kind of relate to that. And then you see this absolutely whopping, you should see it, the size of this bill is enormous, that the government has put forward that actually is going to lead to genuinely a loss of jobs.
Yeah.
Because it treats companies, all sorts of companies, from small micro businesses all the way through to huge corporations, exactly the same in many instances. It demands of them the most incredible regulations in terms of first day rights. So you can literally arrive at work, get sick and be off on the sick, and that's the end of that. Yeah. So what's going to happen is not that gives you a right, it's that employers are less likely to employ people.
Yeah.
You're not allowed to give people trials for the, in terms of you can have 3 months to try you out.
Yeah, because everyone can fake it in an interview. Can they fake it for the next 3 months? That's the thing.
There's all sorts of things like that. There's a huge amount of power being given to the trade unions. Now, I'm a trade union, being a trade unionist, I get that. But only 20%, I think, of the population, of the working population are in trade unions. They're treating every workplace as though it's a public sector workplace. They're basically saying that you don't need 50% to go out on strike. It can be 10%. They're initiating a wide range of imposed trade union rights on every workplace. So if you've got a family shop and the family are working in it, a trade union official now has the right to barge in and walk in and say there should be a trade union here. I mean, it's impertinent to say the least.
Yeah.
And by the way, in the name of women, I just do want to say this, they've got this absolutely ludicrous duty that they're imposing, which I put an amendment in against, which is on equality action plans on the gender pay gap. So the gender pay gap is more complicated than they think. That's the first thing. It would be huge amounts of bureaucracy. But listen, what's more, an imposition on every employer that they have to give menopause support. And that menopause support, which is not dictated, or they will be fined. They will be in trouble, right? They don't do it.
Speaking as a menopausal woman, I find that abominable.
Exactly. Can you imagine anything worse than HR sidling up to you and organising a set of things saying, do you need a fan? Are you all right? Do you want to talk about it? I mean, it's the most condescending nonsense you've ever heard of.
I thought women, I remember my mum's generation, they fought for women not to be talked about as just bundles of hormones. And now we're just going to go, oh, no, we can't possibly. Oh, God, there's too much more I want to talk to you about, which we haven't got time for. The clock is against us. But Baroness Claire Fox, I do believe you may be just the sanest person on everything. What can I say? Thank you very much indeed for joining us, Baroness Claire Fox. Very quick word, Sam Armstrong, on these employment rights law, because it's Angela Rayner's baby. And again, on the face of it, that sounds great, but what it will simply mean is employers simply won't employ people.
Well, it also includes within it this banter ban, which requires publicans, sports stadiums and the like to police the conversations of their customers. So if you go to the pub and have a conversation in which you make somebody behind the bar feel uncomfortable, that's it, you're going to be out. Or if you go to a football stadium and you shout at the referee, you must be blind,
and we're not talking about someone, say, using the N-word or being homophobic slur, but we're talking about someone saying, well, yeah, but there aren't, trans women aren't women. That alone, that could basically mean a legal action by the barmaid
against the company.
Against the company. Madness.
It's so extreme that if a football fan shouts at the ref, you must be blind. If somebody with a partially sighted friend overhears,
I think that someone who's partially sighted might be offended by that.
You're out.
We are living in a mad, mad world. You know, we talk about like how we want to be against Iran because people don't have freedom, but we do. Yeah, maybe it's going the other way around. This is Talk. Stay tuned. This is the Home of Common Sense.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so that we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us because, as you know, that's right there. That's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you are
Mr.
not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. By the way, if you've not had a look at our YouTube page, it's actually called The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Just for this show, we've got a Talk page as well, of course. But if you want to go to The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, if there's anything you missed, if you just tuned in, you've missed a rip-roaring first hour, if I don't say so myself. And I do get onto that page. Click on subscribe and you'll never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, I'm going to be talking more about Donald Trump and those strikes in Iran. And he has warned Iran to make peace quickly after those devastating strikes on Tehran's nuclear facilities. We understand Israel has repeated an attack on the Fordo facility. But the US president boasted that the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers had completely and totally obliterated the Islamist State's underground atomic plant at Fordo, warned that any retaliation by Iran would be what he called the worst mistake they've ever made. He's also been talking about regime change. Make Iran great again. We shall see whether that comes about. What has been particularly interesting is the inability of David Lammy, our Foreign Secretary, and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer to be very clear that the action was the right thing to do. David Lammy was asked 3 times whether it was the right and legal thing to do, and basically just kept replying, well, we weren't involved. Not that that's actually an answer to that question. Still going on there, but also the Metropolitan Police Chief has said he's shocked and frustrated at a planned protest in support of Palestine Action in London today. They've managed to exclude the protesters from the Westminster area and to limit the time, because they can actually limit protests. But Sir Mark Rowley said that while the right to protest is essentially said actions in support of such a group go beyond what most of us see as a legitimate protest. This comes after, of course, the Home Secretary is set to prescribe the group as a terrorist organisation after they broke into RAF Bryce Norton Air Force Base and sprayed 2 military planes with red paint, causing millions of pounds worth of damage. Plus, we're going to be talking about the NHS. Labour's own voters now see high immigration as the biggest single pressure on the NHS. This is a survey of 2,000 people who voted for Keir Starmer last year. This comes as 1,000 migrants in small boats crossed the Channel in just 2 days at the weekend on Friday and Saturday. We'll talk more about that coming up. Also worth noting, by the way, that Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has confirmed a rapid national investigation into maternity care provision in the NHS in England. He's made the announcement to the Royal obstetricians and gynecologists this morning and apologised to the families of babies that have died or had poor care in various different cities. Up to 10 most at-risk units will be investigating and report to Wes Streeting by Christmas. In his speech, he acknowledged the failures at places like Nottingham, Leeds and Sussex, among others. And he said the mindset of deaths at birth being something that just happens is something that has to end. Other breaking news, by the way, since we've come on air, Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, is visiting London today ahead of a 2-day summit with NATO leaders in The Hague. President Zelensky is expected to discuss his country's defences and new ways to increase pressure on Russia. Joining me today for all the conversation is commentator Sam Armstrong. I think it's one of those things, I mean, you and I are very much in agreement on in terms of, you know, Russia's hostilities against Ukraine and what the European leaders and what the American leadership should be doing to help Ukraine. And it is fascinating that we see these incredible contrasts when it comes to dealing with Israel and Iran. And yes, OK, we've taken part in defensive procedures, taking down weapons that have been aimed from Iran to Israel, but not being involved in, probably only told at the last minute about this US attack on these 3 nuclear sites over the weekend, Sam. But also the mealy-mouthed exchanges we've seen from Keir Starmer and David Lammy about Iran. Like, you know, 3 times David Lammy asked this morning on the BBC if the US military action against Iran was the right thing to do. And he just kept saying, we weren't involved in military action, as if we can't give an opinion on it, whether we were involved or not. And yet we've got the same issue with Donald Trump's failure to sort of call it right on Ukraine and sort of on the one hand, on the other hand, as if they're both equal. I think it's very strange to be a sort of a commentator, to be a voter in this country right now, and to watch these strange contortions. So many people in politics, so many people in the media, so many people who we may know and love, but nevertheless contort themselves into whether some particular military actions or whatever are right or wrong, and some others are not right or wrong. It seems so clear-cut to me. You know, Israel has a right of self-defence. Iran, against Hamas and against Iran. Iran is a threat. They had the right to go in. America's right to go in as well to basically see off it. Ukraine has a right to self-defence. Russia is the country in the wrong, unprovoked attack. These things seem to me to be so eminently obvious and black and white. I find it difficult when people, whether it's David Lammy, Keir Starmer or Donald Trump, struggle with both of those or one or both of those conflicts.
Yeah, I have a simple rule, which is I don't like countries that want to kill me. Just putting
You're
that out
going
there
out on a limb in
policy.
a quite old-fashioned way there, but you know.
There are 2 reasons why David Lammy seems to be unable to answer this most basic question of was it right or was it wrong. Either he thinks it was wrong because of this bizarre belief in international law that says, oh, we can't do anything without checking with the lawyers first, and he's embarrassed about what normal people might think about him, or he thinks it was right. And he's worried about what the reaction would be amongst Labour's problems, constituencies in inner cities that we all know exactly what's going on and we have to pretend isn't happening. Those are the only 2 options.
Which do you think it is and which is worse? Because they're both pretty awful.
Well, to tell you the truth, I don't know which is worse of those 2. We are left in this bizarre situation in which we have to choose between two evils here. But what jumps through, what shines through it all, is the sad decline of Britain as a country. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, frankly, 1 year ago, Britain would have been a major player in what was going on right now in the Middle East. Today, we are barely even a footnote. I don't think it's any more consequential what Keir Starmer thinks than it is the president of Gabon, right? We have been reduced to the level, to the rank of other nations. And there was one thing, actually, we could possibly have contributed to that mission, which was use of Diego Garcia base. Yeah. An island base, a huge strategic asset that we have given over to an ally of China. It couldn't be used because we would have had to have notified Mauritius, who would no doubt would have notified China, who no doubt would have notified Iran as to what was going on. The one thing we could have offered was that. And as a result, American Air Force pilots that could have done this mission in 6 hours had to fly halfway around the world.
18 hours there, 18 hours back.
36-hour mission. I mean, I get uncomfortable on a plane if I have to sit there for more than 3 hours on my trip down to the Med in the summer. It is Ryanair, but nevertheless, these guys had to go through something of utter heroism, utter devotion, incredible mission, because Britain had chosen to abandon our national security interest, those of our allies, in order to placate international lawyers. And what's worse, having done it, having been shamed by it, we are doing it even now. This country is run by Lord Hermer, for Lord
Attorney
Hermer.
General.
This is... there was a moment, I don't know when it occurred in the last 20 years, in which there was a coup in this country in which international lawyers, public lawyers, Doughty Street took over this country without
And they've taken over every area, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's defence policy, whether it's immigration policy, whether it's I mean, you know, you name it, in every possible field they have taken over in all the important ways, and everyone is now beholden to it. But I just found it extraordinary. Foreign Secretary David Lammy asked 3 times to the BBC, is the US military action against Iran was it the right thing to do? He said, I've said we weren't involved in the military action. Asked again, was it the right thing to do? What I've said is that ultimately this can only be dealt with in diplomacy again. And then again, asked again, were the strikes illegal or legal? Well, he said, we weren't involved. It's for the Americans to discuss those issues. We have a foreign secretary who can't say whether or not it was a good thing for our greatest military ally to take out the secret nuclear facilities, trying to build a bomb to kill our biggest and only democratic ally in the Middle East, and also that a country that has threatened America and Britain and the entire Western civilization, a country which has been secretly building these weapons against the Non-Proliferation Treaty. The IEA, the International Atomic Agency, made it very, very, very clear they've enriched uranium to 60%. There's no reason to do that. I mean, literally no reason to do that unless you want military-grade uranium so you can build a nuclear weapon. They have said they want to annihilate our ally Israel. They've repeatedly fomented terror attacks across the Middle East, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthi rebels, all funded by Iran, Syria. The Syrian regime helped by Iran. They have been helping Russia in Ukraine against our ally Ukraine. They have fomented terror attacks here. There's a terror attack still going through the courts here, fomented by Iran. I just don't think, was the US action the right thing to do? Was it legal or illegal? It's a difficult question for anyone with A, a brain, and B, a moral conscience to answer. So is he thick? Or is he a bad person? Or is he both?
Well, my worry is actually that nobody is stupid enough to not have a view on this, right? This is a basic question of right and wrong. And anybody with a conscience would come to the inevitable conclusion that this regime, this evil, malevolent force that attacks us, conducts attacks every bit as serious, by the way, as what Russia did with Novichok on attacking the Skripals, that what they are doing is evil. I think David Lammy accepts that. I think David Lammy believes that. And that is what makes it all the more sinister, because he is deliberately not saying it. He's deliberately not coming out and saying what anybody with a pulse could do, because, as I say, either he is so in hock to the international lawyers that run this country, or he is too worried about upsetting one particular community in this country, and he's unable to stand with our closest ally, and as a result, he is putting his narrow political interests over and above the national security of this country.
National security and right and wrong. And it is interesting, again, we need to bring everyone to the table. You can't negotiate with insane religious fundamentalists. I think we've worked... We didn't... When we had Al-Qaeda, there was no negotiation with Al-Qaeda in 2001. They were told, Taliban, give up Al-Qaeda, or we're going to come in. They went in. There was no negotiation with bin Laden. There was no negotiation with ISIS. We went in and killed them. I don't remember any complaining then. They certainly didn't complain about all the civilians who died. And, oh, my God, tens of thousands of civilians died as a result of that. No one was complaining about that. I mean, not mainstream at all. They seem to think there's something equal between even what's currently going on between Israel and Iran. And we understand Israel has been attacking the Fordo nuclear site again today. And again, we've seen missiles. Again, we've seen huge devastation in Israeli cities. But it's very, very clear. The Israelis are carrying out targeted attacks. Very clearly targeted attacks on nuclear and military sites. They are targeting, scientists, military leaders. Whereas you've got the ridiculous situation where you've got the Iranians are clearly targeting civilians.
Well, and who are the Israelis targeting? Well, one target they've just attacked in the last few minutes is the Evin prison, which is where Iran holds its political dissidents, including Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, a British citizen who was held there for many years as a hostage, taken in order to extract money out of this country.
Yeah. And it worked.
Israel has just destroyed the entrance to that prison. So who is Israel targeting and who is it defending? Well, one of the groups it's defending are democracy activists within Iran. Israel, even in this moment, is choosing to spend its resources, its time, in order to enable the defenders and promoters of democracy in this country, in Iran, and in order to stand up for the Iranian people. If you want to know who people's side are on, look at who they target. Iran is targeting hospitals in Israel where sick people are receiving treatment. Israel is targeting the places where Iran tortures its own dissidents.
I think if you check more closely, that Israeli hospital targeted those Iranian missiles. If that would be how the BBC would report it, surely, I don't know. What do you make of the protest today? It's not going to be allowed outside Parliament, but Palestine Action, these are the people who, yes, one of the many basically useful idiots of supporters for the likes of Iran. And we had people at the weekend, by the way, on marches in London, waving placards of the Ayatollah Khamenei, waving Iranian flags. I mean, good God, people. This is one of the most tyrannical regimes on the planet. These people who think they're woke and right on and cool and on the side of good, supporting a regime which, mutilates, murders, beheads people for having just the most benign views. Women for not covering, not even just not wearing a headscarf, not wearing it correctly, for goodness sake. Gay people, those trans people you care so much about, don't have a good line around. People are forced to become supposedly trans because otherwise they'll be executed for being gay. That's not a pro-trans policy, folks. Women totally subjugated. Everyone. This is an awful, terrible regime. But no, we're going to be on the side of this regime, they think. And then we've got, Palestine Action. So they're the ones who went into RAF Bryce Norton before the weekend, and easy to get in, just climbed over a fence, not enough security. We need a wake-up call on security in this country, really do. And they caused millions of pounds worth of damage to 2 RAF jets with throwing red paint on them. They were going to be prescribed, we understand today, by Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, as a prescribed terror organisation. That's what they've been referred to as by Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Commissioner. But he expressed shock this morning that, they're being allowed to protest. He says there's nothing we can do if they're not prescribed. The police are, though, allowed to, impose restrictions. So they're not going to be allowed to protest in Westminster outside Parliament. They can only protest between 12 and 3. They're not going to dominate the streets. I have a funny feeling they're all going to be on my tube on the way home. And annoyingly, I forgot my Israeli flag again. But in their cafes and their performative work. But this is an organisation that, people say, it's pro-Palestinian civilian. Is it?
The fact that we are celebrating that we've moved them 100 yards up the road and limited their protest to early afternoon shows just how pathetic this country has come. Nothing gets me as angry as this. Let me be very, very clear. If you stand with enemies of this country whose regime's leaders have declared that attacking us and our interests is part of your national identity, if you stand against this country's allies, if you attack this country's military assets, its planes, which, by the way, are cargo planes, they're not capable of attacking anyone. If you do all of those things, you are a traitor. And I'm sorry to put it highly. You are a traitor to this country. You have committed, as far as I'm concerned, treason. And there is nothing as serious as that. As far as I'm concerned, each and every single person that has been involved in this despicable organisation that has been allowed to carry on committing wanton criminality for far too long.
And it's not just, this isn't the first event. They've been attacking businesses,
businesses, Donald Trump's golf courses. They have made it basically impossible to run legitimate arms companies in this country. If you have played any role in this organisation at any stage, you should be rounded up and detained for as long as is necessary for you to be disabused of your crazy Britain-hating
they'll be radicalised even more. But what I find extraordinary is the number of people on the left, and even Shami Chakrabarti, formerly of Liberty, now a Labour peer. I mean, she used to be. I suppose she used to be a good soul. Some of her views now are so unbelievably immoral. Hi, Shami, if you want to come on the show and discuss that any time. But she these comparisons with the suffragettes. When anyone does this, like the suffragettes didn't have a vote, and they resorted after decades of action. They resorted to really very low levels of violence. They caused more hurt to themselves than they caused to anybody else. I mean, the idea that you can compare, or the ANC, Nelson Mandela, if you don't have the vote. Anyone who's a member of Palestine Action in this country, who's a Briton, has a vote. If you want to try and force change in this country, you go to the ballot box, you put your ideas forward, you persuade political parties, you stand yourself. That's how you get change. You don't force it. That's why I feel the same way about the Just Stop Oils and all the other eco-campaigners demanding action. No. And by the way, they've all the same, like Greta Thunberg and all the other eco-activists, they're now all suddenly pro-Palestinian. That's the cause in the last year or two that's much more fashionable. And they're equally dumb on both topics and equally immoral, I believe, on both topics. But it is just extraordinary, this idea that, well, because I want things to be a certain way that I think, then I can just do anything I want to make it happen because I've got good on my side. Well, I know I've got good on my side, but I don't think it gives me the right to go and blatantly cause criminal damage or threaten people, funnily enough.
Yeah, it's violent, it's bullying, and it's anti-democratic because we have an elected government in this country. By the way, I don't particularly like this government that is elected.
Democratically elected.
They've been democratically elected. They're entitled to set the views and the policy of this country. But these people believe that they have got some God-given right to impose their views, their attitude, their policy over everyone else. And if they're not able to get their way by using the many natural advantages they have, like a BBC that's always on their side and everything else, they are going to resort to violence. And it is violence. As far as I'm concerned, this is not non-violent protest. If you can destroy military assets, if you take hammers and crowbars to people's businesses, to people's property, that is violence. And they are prepared to stop at nothing, to force their view on the rest of us. Absolutely. That is anti-democratic bullying.
Absolutely, simple as that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Palestine Action protest today, as well as obviously in Iran. Do get in touch. Is the world more or less safe after Donald Trump's devastating strikes on Iran's nuclear sites? So we've got the Israel Defense Minister, Israel Katz. He said the IDF is currently striking with unprecedented force regime targets and governmental repression bodies in the heart of Tehran. And he says for every missile fired at the Israeli home front, the Iranian dictator will be severely punished, and the strikes will continue with full intensity. He says we will continue to act to defend the home front and defeat the enemy until all war objectives are achieved. Your reaction to that, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. This is Talk.
proxies are pretty much...
Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:26, we're just coming up to you. Let's get straight to your calls and your messages. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's go see what your messages are saying. David says, and asks, is the world more or less safe after Trump's strikes on Iran's nuclear sites? More safe, says David. Imagine the Hamas psychos who murdered old women and young girls having a nuclear weapon. I can't bear thinking about it. I mean, you kind of nailed it, David. Brian says, worse. America seems to think they can do whatever they please without consequences, and that just isn't the case. They drag everybody else into their conflicts based on falsifying facts and global scaremongering, only to be proven wrong after the fact every single time. I mean, they're not proven wrong every single time, but I mean, I hate to tell you, Brian, America can do whatever they want because actually international decisions and things are based on power and military might and the willingness to use it. I mean, I know we like to think it's all down to what someone does or does not say at the United Nations, but actually it's down to military might. Michael says, I believe America represents the reason for most of the world's instability, as they have a hand in destabilising most of the global conflicts. Only Americans think they are great, and the majority of the world think considerably differently. And Amy says, the world has been made a safer place because of the actions of Israel and the US. They knew the threats and acted. Controversially, very different views there. Love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Let's go to John, who's in Bradford. Hello, John.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning. What do you want to say?
Well, two things. Number one, I support what Donald Trump did 100%. I also support the state of Israel doing what they're doing. And this Lord Hermer passing these rules and regulations, what you can and can't do. I don't hear him saying much about Ukraine.
Well, I mean, they probably are. I mean, I think it's much simpler, isn't it, in terms of Ukraine is invaded. You mean critical of Russia?
Well, it's not critical as well. So we're supplying arms to Ukraine. He hasn't said that's illegal. Yeah, if we supply our ammunition to Israel, that's against the law.
Because we need to wait for Iran to literally have an invading army into Israel before. But they've supplied the terrorists. Hamas and Hezbollah are entirely Iranian, made up by them and funded by them, and so arms supplied by them. They have attacked Israel. It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Exactly. I mean, I worked for El Al in the 1970s. I was in Israel twice when the two wars broke out. It's something that's been going on for many, many years. When you get a state whose prime objective is to destroy the state of Israel, what can Israel do? The only thing it can do is to do what it does best, and that's fight back. And you never, ever mess around with Israel, because if you do, you'll get a bloody nose.
Every war they've been involved in was not started by them, and they've won every single one. I don't know why. I mean, if you look on a map, you look at the size of Israel, you look at the size of Iran, I mean, 10 million people versus 90 million people even. It is extraordinary the military might that Israel has been able to show over the last week.
Yeah. And all we've got is a pathetic foreign secretary, which is an absolute joke. And we've got a prime minister that doesn't know one end of a stick from another. I mean, both these people are just a great embarrassment to this country, and they're dragging us down. So we're just disappearing in the ground. Nobody takes any notice of us anymore.
What did you make of Rachel Reeves this morning, the Chancellor? She's been speaking this morning. She was out and about, so she was asked about this, and she said Iran needs to get back to the negotiating table, and she urged a de-escalation in the conflict. Fine words, eh?
Yeah, well, you might as well just open the window and shout outside, because you're going to get nowhere. Iran has no intentions of settling this. They've got no intentions of allowing the state of Israel to exist. As far as I'm concerned, you need to go in there, sort them out, and let the Iranian people have the country back.
What about be careful what you wish for? People thought that about Iraq. They thought that about, Afghanistan. It didn't work out so well.
Yeah, but I think you might find a bit of a difference this time, because I remember when I worked for El Al, you could fly to Tehran. You know, it was quite a friendly country, but as I say, sometimes you have to take a risk, and I think that if there was the people in Iran started to rebel against the government, I think you might end up with a better government that you've got now.
Very interesting. Thank you very much indeed. We appreciate that call, John. Let's go to Salman, who is in Leeds. Hello, Salman.
Hello, Julia.
Hello, what do you want to say?
Iran has every right to defend itself from the Zionist entity. Israel has no right to exist. And it's doing the world a huge favour by saving the world from the genocidal state of Israel.
Wait, is this Owen Jones? Is this Owen Jones? And you just put a different accent on. You say Iran has the right to self-defense. I mean, they do. I mean, the countries have a right to defend themselves, but Iran wouldn't need to defend itself if it didn't keep threatening Israel, or indeed many other countries in the Middle East, and funding terrorism. If they just kind of got on with building a great life for their own country and their own people, then they wouldn't be under attack, would they?
On what planet does an occupier have the right to defend itself, Julia?
An occupier? Well, I don't accept that Israel is an occupying force, so... Even if you do believe that, and I don't accept that that is true, do you still think that Iran's actions in funding Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels, and its actions to date, basically announcing, every day we're going, death to Israel, we're going to annihilate you and the Jewish people, do you think that that is something that Israel should have to put up with?
Do you think that Israel has the right to attack Iran out of the blue?
They didn't attack, but they didn't, did they? I've just told you all the things Iran did.
Well, they did attack Iran out of the blue.
Well, they didn't. Well, they didn't. So you literally, have you been living under a rock? Have you been in the Fordo nuclear site, like underground, for the last 20 years? You haven't seen all that Iran's done to attack Israel. It's not out of the blue.
Iran has not attacked Israel.
Iran has not attacked Israel.
Israel does.
Iran, you've just said Iran has not attacked Israel.
Well, when has Iran attacked Israel, Julia?
When they sent missiles in and drone attacks, and when they funded Hezbollah for the attack in the north, when they funded Hamas to attack in the south.
After the Zionists attacked Iran, that's when they attacked them.
Israel hadn't attacked Iran at that point, no. I don't think you're paying much attention, Simon. I think you're getting your information from TikTok, love.
Well, Julia, does Israel have the right to exist?
Yes.
No, it doesn't. How does Israel have the right to exist?
Any country that can defend its borders has a right to exist. There's a realpolitik involved here. It's also the long-standing homeland of the Jewish people, long before there was even the concept of Palestinian homeland. But even if you don't want Israel to be there, even if you accept that, do you not accept that once Israel does exist, and there are 10 million people living there, they might not want to be under permanent terror attack and threat of nuclear annihilation by Iran, and it would be reasonable for them to do their best to stop that from happening?
Well, most religious Jews are against the state of Israel.
No, they're not. No, they're not. No, again, made up nonsense. Salman, we need to talk about we need to talk about where you're getting your information from.
On pro-Palestine marches against the state of Israel. So how does that work?
There are some Jewish people, yes. Not all Jewish people, just like not all Muslims, like not all Catholics, or not all, Methodists, don't all believe the same thing. Mind-blowing, I know.
Yeah, that's right. So how can
So why does that undermine the case that Salman, genuinely, if you want to believe that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, that's fine. You're entitled to that opinion. But you've made a number of statements that are factually, provably untrue about how we got to where we are today.
Well, I mean, Julian, you're Zionist bought and paid for, so I wouldn't be surprised at
bless you, Salman. I am a Zionist. Yes, I believe in Israel's right to exist and right to protect itself. I don't consider Zionist to be an insult, by the way. I think it's something one should be very proud of, although not something one has to not be anti-Semitic or anything like that. I'm not bought and paid for. I have never given a view in public or in private that has ever been anything other than my personally held view. No one tells me what to say, I can assure you.
I very much doubt that, Julia.
You doubt that? Because I couldn't possibly hold these views otherwise.
Yeah.
Who's just out of interest? Who is paying me to give these views that I don't really believe? Tell me.
I think it's pretty obvious.
No, tell me. You've just told. It's so obvious. Tell me. I'm a bear of little brain. Tell me who's paying me to have these views that I don't actually hold.
Listen, Julia.
Is it the Jews? Is it the Jews, Salman?
Of bought and paid for politicians and Rupert Murdoch. That's who.
Rupert Murdoch. Okay, Rupert Murdoch ultimately pays my salary. Yes. But no one here, and I can assure you, no one at any level in the hierarchy has ever told me what I can and what I cannot say.
Your channel, your fake channel.
My fake channel. Here we go.
Yeah, support Israel.
Yes. I don't know if everyone does here. We don't require everyone to toe a party. Like people are allowed to give their own views. That's the whole point of the station.
Do you know Loki?
I can't. Sorry.
Loki.
No, what's Loki? Who? What?
He's a rapper.
I'm 57, mate. Give me a break. Anyway, I don't think we're getting anywhere here, Salma. But I mean, I do appreciate you calling me up. I don't know why you're bothering to call me. I mean, you're very entitled to have your views, but you've got to bother to call me if you genuinely think that I just make up what I say and that I take the abuse that I get on social media and the like, which, by the way, I care not a jot about. But when I don't actually believe what I say, I mean, I don't know why you're wasting your time listening, to be honest with you. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Up next, we are going to talk to a journalist, columnist at Unheard, Thomas Farsi. He thinks that the US attack on the Iranian sites was reckless and illegal and unprovoked. We'll find out how that debate goes up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. To be Julia Hartley-Brewer. Well, after that interesting call with Salman, I've someone on the line who, I think probably agrees with quite a lot of what Salman had to say. Thomas Farsi is a journalist. He's also a columnist at Unheard, and he joins us now here at Talk. Very good morning to you, Thomas.
Hi, Julia. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I think you and I have completely diametrically opposed views on this particular issue in terms of the airstrikes. I woke up on Sunday morning and went, brilliant, great, the world's a safer place. Thank you, Donald Trump, for taking the action you took. I wish that Britain had been involved, and I wish our Prime Minister and our Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, were less mealy-mouthed when asked if the US action was right and legal, and saying that, oh, we had nothing to do with it, we weren't involved, is a rather bizarre response to both of those questions. But where do you stand?
Well, first of all, I think that, the attack was clearly illegal, and I would argue it was clearly unprovoked. And this was an attack, I think we're skirting over the fact that this was an attack on civilian nuclear facilities. This used to be a huge taboo in military terms up until yesterday, basically. Now we've legitimized even nuclear facilities as potential targets for attack. And I think that in itself is very worrying. So I think this attack would be, should be considered egregious regardless of the consequences. But I think we know that that the U.S. action will have consequences, and I think we'll have very dire ones at that. I think...
Such as?
Okay, so I think the first consequence, in broader terms, is that this attack, I think, really dealt a final, definitive blow to what was left of the post-war international legal and institutional order that was already laying in tatters as a result of the sort of Western-supported Israeli actions in Gaza that I would characterize as a genocide.
Okay. Just making up words, that's fine. Yeah, okay.
What the US and Western countries, I think more in general showed with yesterday's attack is that they no longer feel bound by any ethical, moral, or legal principle.
And you think the damage for that long term is going to be huge?
Of the foreign policy, yes. I mean, I think what they've said, what they're saying is that the only logic that is valid is that of raw, naked, unrestrained violence. Whoever is stronger wins.
Okay. Well, I mean, I would say, yeah. That's real life. Can I just clarify? You say the attack by the US on these military sites, clearly military sites, not civilian sites, nuclear sites, which if they weren't nuclear sites, I'm not quite sure why you would be enriching uranium to the extent they enrich uranium, and you'd be doing it 300 metres underground under a mountain in a secret facility if you weren't up to something nefarious and dangerous. But there we are. I mean, silly me, I'm a little bit trusting of the Iranian regime. You say it was clearly illegal. Why do you think it was clearly illegal?
Well, you don't have to believe, first of all, you don't have to believe the Iranian regime. You might want to believe Tulsi Gabbard, the head of US intelligence.
I'd go with the National Atomic Agency instead.
Just in March, said that Iran was not developing a nuclear weapon. Now she's walked those words, but this was a head of US intelligence.
I think what she said was slightly more nuanced than that. I would prefer to go with what the International Atomic Energy Association said in terms of what they've got.
It really wasn't. So there's no evidence whatsoever.
There's no, okay, Thomas, you spoke for a long time earlier. I want Thomas.
The Non-Proliferation Treaty. It is subject to international inspections, unlike Israel, who is the only nuclear-powered country in the region and is not subject to the
Thomas,
not subject to foreign.
That's because Israel doesn't go around threatening its neighbours and fomenting terror attacks on its neighbours. So we're not so worried.
Israel has bombed basically.
Israel has bombed countries that have bombed them. Yes.
It's currently occupying Syria. It's conducting a genocide in Gaza. It's bombed Lebanon.
Okay.
I mean, honestly,
sorry.
Describe Israel as a non-threatening country.
Sorry, Thomas. Right. If any country bombed us, we would bomb them back. That's how it works. That's quite normal. You talk about things clearly illegal because you're arguing that it's unprovoked. Given that Iran has stated, the regime has stated, pretty much once a week for 20 years, our entire aim in life is destruction of the Jews and destruction of the state of Israel. They have funded Hezbollah in Lebanon and their attacks on Israel. They have funded the Hamas in their attacks from Gaza on Israel. They have funded the Houthi rebels, their attacks not just on Israel, but of course on Middle East shipping and other places. They have been funding terror attacks throughout the Middle East against Israel and against Western nations, including Britain. There's a terror attack, alleged plot, funded by Iran, even in going through the courts at this current time. The idea that Iran has just been sitting there going, we haven't done anything. Why would anyone be worried? The fact that they've been developing and enriching uranium to 60% to a point where it is absolutely unnecessary for anything other than for military use. That has been confirmed by the International Atomic Energy Association. Why would you think that was not all of that together? Given that they shout death to Israel every single Friday, why would you think that was not a provocation?
Well, first of all, let's unpack the two questions. On the legality, attacking, bombing a sovereign country without UN Security Council authorization.
Oh, sod UN Security Council authorization. You mean if China and Russia say it's okay?
You're the one that raised the legality or not. You're saying who cares if it was legal or not.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say who cares if it's legal. I said, why do you think it is?
And I'm okay with that, but let's still agree that it was illegal. And then you might say, who cares if it was? But it clearly was illegal by any definition.
By any definition, it was legal because it was a preemptive defensive strike against a country that made it.
Law.
Well, it is. International law absolutely allows that.
There was absolutely no direct definitely not no direct nuclear threat to
no direct. They said
Israel.
The purpose of building the nuclear bomb was to nuke Israel.
The idea that Iran is building a nuclear bomb with the intention of destroying Israel the day it gets the bomb is purely delusional.
What do you think they were using it for then?
So you think they, like all countries, and I think like more and more countries will do after this latest attack, what has this latest attack shown to all the countries in the world? That the only way of avoiding Western aggression, Western bombing, is to have a nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
Iran was bombed
like North Korea.
Because it didn't have... Yes, so what do you think is going to happen now? Well, if the lesson that all countries are taking away from this is we better get a nuclear bomb as soon as possible.
Isn't the lesson of North Korea
we don't want to be the target of Western aggression?
Thomas,
the result of this is going to be more nuclear proliferation, more countries trying to get the bomb because they've realized that that's the only way to
And Thomas, and isn't that the whole
independence?
Isn't that the whole point?
And if you think
Thomas, please, we've got short time, so please just keep it a bit briefer. Isn't that the lesson from Iran, from North Korea, which is that we can't tackle North Korea because they've got the bomb, and therefore we need, because of Iran and its stance on Israel and indeed on Britain and the US and its threats to fellow Middle Eastern countries and through terror and elsewhere, that actually preventing them getting the bomb is absolutely vital. So therefore it was the right thing to do.
Unlike you, I'm glad we didn't also go to war with North Korea. I would see that as a positive thing. You clearly see that as a bad thing.
I'm confused. Clarify. I didn't understand what you said.
You seem concerned that we weren't able to go to war with North Korea. I would say that's
prevent them from getting a bomb.
The fact that they had nuclear weapons stopped us going to war with North Korea. I would see that as a good thing, and in fact I would argue that
great for the people of North Korea.
On this point I stand with John Mearsheimer, who I'm sure you know, probably the greatest international theory academic out there, who believes profoundly in the power of nuclear deterrence, and he's saying that Iran possessing the nuclear weapon would in fact contribute to peace and deterrence.
I think that's genuinely one of the dumbest. I don't care how influential this man is. One of the dumbest things I've ever heard.
Probably the most important international theory academic out there. So maybe you should give a bit more weight to what he's saying.
I
try to think about what he's saying.
I thought about what he said. I disagree with him because I think that politics and international relations don't work like that.
Have nuclear weapons and they are free to attack anyone they want at will because no one else is allowed to have nuclear weapons. You do realize that's...
Do you see the difference, Thomas, do you see the difference between a democratic nation having nuclear weapons and a completely lunatic Islamist fundamentalist organisation, a regime running a country who say they are intent on killing one of their neighbours, and indeed America and Britain, the Western civilization? Do you see the difference between, say, Britain or France or America having nuclear weapons and Iran having nuclear weapons? Do you see no moral difference between those two?
Well, first of all, we know that the only country to have ever actually used the nuclear weapon
to end the Second World War.
The US.
Yeah, and thank God they did.
The country that is acting in the most reckless way at the moment.
So answer the question, because we're really short on time.
Even going by your argument, the country that is acting most aggressively and most erratically now in the Middle East is Israel, which is the only country that has.
There's nothing erratic about defending your people.
I mean, this idea that the Iranian regime, you might not like its ideological and religious cultural inclinations, but to imply that that's somehow crazy, just like Putin is crazy, just like everyone...
You don't think that Islamist fundamentalism isn't crazy?
I would go by...
You don't?
You're just projecting things onto Iran. I wonder how much you actually know about Iran.
You think women being murdered for not covering their hair properly is sane?
Reading the Pentagon's 2014 report on the military power of Iran, which states that Iran's military doctrine is defensive. It is designed to deter an attack,
God bless you.
survive an initial strike. So now you're laughing at a Pentagon report.
I don't. There are plenty of different reports.
You're laughing at the Pentagon.
I'm going by what Iran says. The Iranian regime have said. Thomas, take a breath. The Iranian regime have said what they want to do. We know they were building a bomb. We know they're a danger to their neighbours and to the Middle East and to the West because they told us that. Why don't you believe what they say?
They look.
Are they lying?
Because countries are not crazy. I know you think that,
regimes are crazy.
More than 100 million
Islamist fundamentalism is insane and dangerous.
It is simply deranged to think that Iran would launch a nuclear weapon on Israel just because just for the fun of it, or just for the.
No, their aim in life is to destroy Israel.
They've stated that. Governments operate, even governments that you may not like. Which is why it is just as deranged to think that Putin is going to, is about to roll his tanks out, in Paris and Berlin. This is pure propaganda put out by Western governments to justify their policies.
To justify their actions. We're going to have to leave it there. Thomas, I really hope you'll come on again. It'd be really good to have a longer debate with you. I mean, absolutely fascinating. Terrifying also. Thomas Farsier, journalist and columnist at Unheard. Really brief word for Sam Armstrong, then we've got to go to a break.
There is no excuse too big, too outlandish that some people won't make for those that hate us. Every word they say, every threat they make, every action they take, they will always find a way to point, to distract, to excuse for country after country that hates us and hates what we stand for. And you've got to ask, when these people are here and they're saying this about us, why do their sympathies lie that way?
It's the moral equivalence around, Israel, Britain, America, Iran, an unprovoked illegal attack is clearly, that's what Thomas Farsier says. Love to hear your thoughts. Do give us a call. Up next, we're going to be talking about why most Labour voters now think that the biggest burden on the NHS is mass immigration. Who knew? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
The other Iranian proxies are pretty much neutralised, and there's no country that's going to come to Iran's assistance. The other Middle Eastern states are fully behind Israel and the US in these strikes on Iran. Iran's nuclear program threatened them just as much as it threatened Israel. And countries like China and Russia, which are allies of Iran, they may help in some different ways, but I'm pretty confident that neither of them are likely to get engaged in any direct military way in support of Iran.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:53 is the time. Let's welcome Robert Bates to the show. He's Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control and joins us. A very good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. I do this to you all the time. I kind of get caught up in a heated debate, and we've got very little time. I promise you we'll get straight to it there, because there's a fascinating new poll out this weekend showing that, a majority of Labour voters now think that the biggest burden on the NHS is mass immigration. This is something of a sea change in public opinion, isn't it?
I don't think so. I think for a long time the British public have been very clear that when you grow your population artificially through the mass migration agenda that we've seen of the last decade or so, and you don't make the appropriate investment in the British workforce, then you are going to end up with problems. You know, we're constantly told that without immigration, the NHS would be on its knees. But last year, of the 850,000 visas we awarded, about 1% actually went to medical practitioners. So there's a clear discrepancy there between the pressures being put on it and actually how much immigration is actually alleviating the problem. I think we also need to recognise it's a self-imposed wound as well, in that we place a ridiculous cap of very few thousand places on British medical students hoping to go into the profession, which is something that needs to be completely removed. As well.
That is one of the biggest frustrations we have, and also again the limitation on funding for nurses as well, when they have to work for free in hospitals and therefore and units, so they don't actually get a chance to earn the money to help them through their degree. But the doctors limit, we have genuinely got, I think about, there's another like 3,000 students who've got straight A's in all the right subjects at A level who could be going into a medical school, but we go, oh no, it's cheaper to import them from any other country rather than pay $250,000 to train them up here when they're actually more likely to stay here and might usefully do things like, you know, speak the language fluently. Probably come down quite a lot for a lot of people who are being treated in hospital.
Yeah, and you look at what actually happens. Don't train British people. We have to rely on individuals from countries on the WHO red list who have lower training standards, and I think that's probably why we see that foreign-born doctors are twice as likely to referred to the General Medical Council. In 2016. 3/4 of those that were struck off as doctors were from foreign-born nationalities as well. So there's a clear problem here, and you know, I'd rather take someone that perhaps had fallen slightly short of their A-level required grade, but were at least being trained in a British university, than someone from an unknown university in Nigeria or Zimbabwe. I think it's pretty much a common sense position.
No, indeed, and in India, again, I remember this is a Reuters report from a few years back, that 1 in 4 doctors, qualified supposedly doctors working in India, and we have an awful lot of doctors come over from India, have no medical qualification at all, but they're working as doctors in India, and we're obviously importing people here. There are some big remarks. People might have a piece of paper saying they are, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are. But I mean, that's, I thought was, you know, it was really interesting. That it was Labour voters, people who voted for Keir Starmer last July, who were saying that they think this is a problem. A real, understanding that, you know, a lot of the things we've been told, you know, economic benefits and all of that, and the social cohesion and all that, that actually that stuff is flying out of the window now. Of course, there's been more and more concern, has there not, quite rightly, over migrants who come Channel migrants arriving. We had more than 1,000 arrive on Friday and Saturday between them. More again with more calm weather we're going to get this week, we're expecting. But again and again we're having migrants who are granted, they finally go through the asylum process. They are told they haven't got asylum. They lose their appeal. I mean, most of them, it seems to me, win their appeals, and because they've, I don't know, got a bad headache that day, or they met a girl once in a pub in Liverpool and they've got the right to stay in the country because they're family links or something. But again and again, we've got migrants being kept in hotels at taxpayers' expense, free to walk around, even though they've lost their claim for asylum.
The whole claim process now, which it takes an individual to undergo to claim asylum, is ridiculous. It's so much more straightforward if we actually got back to the Tory position, which was if an individual arrives in this country illegally on a small boat, then they automatically are not eligible to claim asylum in this country. You look at the tribunal system, which is frankly stuffed to the rafters with left-wing activists approving individuals that have maybe been rejected by the Home Office. I don't know why we have a tribunal system. It should ultimately be the decision of democratically elected politicians as to who or who leaves the country. And this is part of the reason why we are seeing such a backlog. Labour seem to be doing all they can to make the hotel situation worse. Of course, extending the period an individual can stay in the hotels after having a successful application, and then also extending legal aid and increasing legal aid so that we can really sort of throw flies in the ointment, and you have sort of crafty lawyers doing all they can to make sure their individual isn't actually removed as well.
And once a person's been in the country after a certain period of time, basically we know they're never going to be gone out of the country. They're going to be here forever. We're stuck with them. And we've seen, haven't we, the crime statistics, we've seen again and again, and councils are now getting, the public body's getting very wary of giving us information about who's responsible for crimes. We're going to start getting that data. I think they've had to give in and allow us some of that data. But we have a serious issue with particularly illegal migrant, but migrant crime in this country from specific countries, the young men of those countries who don't share a lot of our values, who are coming over here and are not going, oh, well, I'm finally here in the land of plenty, let me contribute. They're doing the exact opposite. And it's a reality check everyone has to wake up to.
Precisely, and I think the Casey report shone a light on that. I think it was an establishment enough figure that was actually talking about this, about politicians finally have to...
No, a lefty baroness said it, so it suddenly became true.
Well, exactly. But whereas the statistics that perhaps you and I have been talking about previously as well, which shows, things such as a third of sexual assaults last year were committed by foreign nationals, those really don't get much pickup by the BBC or politicians at all. And, it's an uncomfortable conversation that they just don't want to have.
No, exactly. And again, facts aren't bigoted. They're just facts. Really good to get you on. Robert Bates, Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control. Thank you very much indeed for that. We're going to get more from Sam Armstrong coming up. More from you. Lots of calls on the board. I'll get to as many as I can in the next hour. Also, after an update on the news, going to talk to Tom Tugendhat. He's a former Security Minister with the Conservatives, been very strong on this issue in Israel. If you want to call in, you agree with Thomas Farsley, you agree with, many others on this issue, get in touch. This is Talk.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament to respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because, as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past 12 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, it is absolutely fabulous to have your company. Great for you to be getting in touch as well, in particular on, let's face it, the biggest story of the last few days, and that, of course, is there's US airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. We had a guest on the last half hour, Thomas Farsley, who says this was completely illegal and unprovoked. I mean, I'm not sure some people have been paying attention to what's been going on in the last 20 years, but Donald Trump has warned Iran to make peace quickly after the US conducted those devastating strikes on nuclear facilities. More strikes by Israel on the same facilities again today as well. But the president boasted that the B-2 Spirit stealth bombers had completely and totally obliterated the Islamic State's underground atomic plant at Fordo and elsewhere, and warned that any retaliation by Iran would be, in his words, the worst mistake they've ever made. He has also talked about MEGA, not MAGA, make America great again, but make Iran great again with a regime change. Wonder if you would support that. We'll talk about that in just a couple of moments with Tom Tugendhat, former Conservative Security Minister. Also going to be talking about, well, I suppose two stories involving the NHS. Really. The Health Secretary has warned there could be cuts to NHS services to cover the cost of carrying out assisted deaths. This after the assisted dying bill was voted through by MPs on Friday. Each death could cost the taxpayer more than £15,000. If we haven't got funds for keeping people alive, why are we helping to spend NHS funds on killing people, some might argue. And weight loss jobs can be prescribed by GPs for the first time from today on the NHS. They'd begun a massive rollout of the drug. Some 220,000 severely obese people with the greatest need, we're told, will receive Manjaro from their doctor over the next 3 years. This comes also, by the way, as an announcement this morning from Wes Streeting, their health secretary, of a rapid national investigation into maternity care. He made the announcement this morning, apologising to families of babies that have died or had poor care in many maternity facilities around the country, and said that we need to end the mindset of deaths at birth being something that just happens. Well, we'll talk about all of that with Carl Hannigan a little bit later in the show. I'm delighted to say, still joining me today is Sam Armstrong, who's a commentator, joining us throughout the show, as he always does on a Monday. Great to be joined by you. I just want to give you a quick chance to come back on actually that migration conversation we had. This was a poll involving a couple of thousand people who'd voted Labour at the last general election. An extraordinary number saying, look, they view that the biggest pressure on the NHS, bearing in mind the economy, immigration, the NHS, all the three big topics in political debate now, they think that the biggest pressure on the NHS is mass migration, the huge numbers of people coming from abroad. Do you think that that is quite a sea change? I mean, our previous guest, Robert Bates, didn't think it was, and some, people are moving to this position anyway, but so many of the things that we've been told about how mass immigration benefits our country economically, socially, in all the other ways, contributing to the NHS. The NHS wouldn't survive without foreign workers. That actually people are waking up to the fact that actually one of the biggest burdens we've got is huge number of people, some 10 million in the last 20 years coming to this country, adding to the burden.
Yeah, gone are the days where this is a fringe issue that just concerns a few people. It is increasingly an issue that unites voters of all parties and separates them, frankly, from too many in Westminster that have tried to cover this issue up, to brush it under the carpet, to move on and talk about things that they personally find it more pleasant to talk about. Yeah. And there is a simple, very obvious reason for that, which is that on every high street, everywhere across the country, migration is now an observable phenomenon that people have seen have made things worse. The shops that have changed, the crime rates that have gone up, the difficulty to get a hospital appointment. No party, certainly not this government, can continue to ignore it.
Yeah, exactly. Really interesting debate. Thank you very much indeed. Now, we do want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000, text on 87222. Get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Your reaction to those airstrikes from the US on Iran. As a world more or less safe? Anything else you want to say? Get in touch. Right now, let's put those questions to Tom Tugendhat. He's a former Conservative Security Minister and still a Conservative MP and joins us now. Good morning to you, Tom. So, afternoon, apologies.
Morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, we all had a late night last night, obviously. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Question that was put by the BBC 3 times this morning to David Lammy, asking him if the US military action against Iran was the right thing to do and was it a legal thing to do. His responses were always along the lines of, we weren't involved in the military action, and saying we weren't involved, it's for the Americans to discuss those issues. Can you answer those questions? So was the US action right thing to do? Was it legal?
Well, I think it was both right and legal. This is part of a continuing war, very sadly, that hasn't just started yesterday. It's not a preemptive strike. It's a long-standing conflict between Israel and Iran. Iran, as you know, has been attempting to kill Israelis on numerous occasions using their proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, and most recently the Houthis. And what the Israelis are doing, sadly, is not only legal, and I wish it weren't, but it also appears to be necessary. Now, the question is, under what law is the United States doing it? Well, I suspect they're doing it because the Israelis asked them to. And in Article 51 of the UN Charter says that you have the right of self-defense and allies have the right to help you in the right of self-defense. So I don't think there's much debate about that.
Well, it's interesting.
Frankly.
We had a guest on earlier and a caller earlier. The guest, Thomas Farsi, was saying it was quite clearly illegal, quite clearly unprovoked. That the UN, again, the UN is the ultimate decider, the lawyers are the ultimate decider of these things, and the argument that this is just a big military power basically doing whatever they want. But isn't that kind of how realpolitik works?
Well, I mean, first of all, it may be, but that even that I don't think is the point. I mean, the reality is, how can you possibly argue it is illegal to defend yourself? And only if you argue that Hamas has no connection to Iran, which frankly would be laughable, or Hezbollah has no connection to Iran, which would be, absurd. Could you possibly argue that Iran has not been targeting Israel for many, many years. And actually, if you just simply read, I mean, you don't even need to read. If you have the merest cursory glance at Twitter and the Ayatollah's tweets over the last 5-10 years, I mean, he's constantly threatening to murder Israelis in new ways. I mean, it's literally continuous, and there's no, this isn't news. I mean, I find it very difficult to understand how you cannot think that the Iranians are building a bomb to threaten Israel.
I think there are lots of international debates and national debates where it's perfectly reasonable for people to hold different views. I still think it's perfectly reasonable for people to argue, I'm a massive Brexiteer, but, to be pro, staying in the EU. There are perfectly reasonable arguments. On this issue, I find it, same with Ukraine, I find it very difficult that people don't see this as a clear, black and white, right and wrong issue. Do you think that is how Donald Trump sees it? But he somehow seems to see it in Israel, but he doesn't see it in Ukraine. And how do you think that Keir Starmer and David Lammy see it? And the basis they keep saying we need to de-escalate, we need to go back to the table, to the negotiations, and they won't say that they believe this was the right thing to do.
Look, I mean, Julia, you'll forgive me, I'm not going to try and interpret Donald Trump's mind. I think that's beyond well, certainly beyond me anyway. As for the government, look, they keep seeming to think that their job is to offer legal advice to the world rather than to offer leadership to the British people. And forgive me, I think the job of the British government, I think the job of me and other representatives of the British people is to do what's best for Britain. And to offer the best defence, the best opportunity, the best interest for the UK, for the people of the United Kingdom that I possibly can. Now, there is an argument you can make, and I don't agree with it, but you can make the argument that Israel should have tried not to strike Iranian targets, but instead only strike targets of Iranian proxies. I mean, I don't think it was working. You can make the argument if you like. I think that it was failing. You can also make the argument, if you wish, that it would have been better if Israeli forces in some way, either directly or through increasingly large munitions, took out every single site themselves. I mean, that's a respectable position. I don't think it would have made, frankly, much difference. The Iranians are very clear that Israel and the United Kingdom are involved in absolutely everything that any one of the three of us does, so you're going to be blamed anyway. So I'm not sure I buy either of those arguments, but I think it's very difficult to argue, in fact impossible to argue, that the Iranian state hasn't been targeting Israel consistently and in a most vile way for many years. And actually they've been targeting us too. I mean, Julia, when I was security minister, the head of MI5 put out a statement, which clearly I had to approve, in which he cited 17 incidents of credible threats to people in the United Kingdom organised by the Iranian regime. The IRGC is a vile organisation who has oppressed the Iranian people hugely over many years. And, when I've spoken to Iranian friends in recent days, in the last day or two, who have friends in Tehran, I'm not going to tell you that they're pleased about the attacks. Of course they're not pleased about the attacks. Nobody's pleased to have their own city attacked. But they're not at all defensive of the attacks against the IRGC. In that sense, one person said that his mother had referred to it as it's like watching your kidnapper getting beaten up. Yes. You know that there might be an effect on you, but at the same time,
you welcome it. And again, very muted response from other Middle Eastern leaders, I thought very noticeable. What do you think in terms of what's going on back home? Palestine Action, they were going to face prescription, being banned as a terrorist organisation after the damage they did, millions of pounds worth of damage to two planes at RAF Brize Norton after getting, well, I say breaking in, they've jumped over a fence. It's not hardly any proper security there. However, they've had a target of violence against organisations and business arms companies and the like, and any company doing business with Israel, and they're going to face this ban, but not soon enough to have them banned from allowed to protest in London today. The Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, they've managed to limit the protest. May not be in Westminster, not outside Parliament, so you guys, I think you're in Westminster right now, saved from that, and it can only be between 12 and 3, so it's going to be limited. But what do you make of Palestine Action, and when you were a security minister, how big a threat do you think they are? Or is this an attack on, as some on that side of the debate are arguing, attack on basic freedom of speech?
So I don't think it is an attack on basic freedom of speech. If you attack a military site in the United Kingdom, there are various different laws that could cover it. But the very least, you're damaging the ability of the British people to protect themselves. So it's a very, very serious attack. And, you know, you may say, oh, well, it's only red paint. Well, is it? Is there acid in there? Is there something that's corroded the engine? I don't know. We're going to have to check the engine. It's going to cost millions of pounds just to do that. And during that period, there's 2 air-to-air refueling aircraft that we can't put up. And because we can't put them up, we can't refuel. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It has huge knock-on implications for military operations. Now, I do think that the Chief of the Air Staff is going to be, well, in fact, I'm sure he already has ordered a major inquiry into what happened at RAF Brighton, and I'm sure there's going to be many red faces. But I think the first thing to say is that there are also groups, and I'm not going to speak specifically about that group, but there are groups of a similar nature who we know are getting funding from overseas in order to conduct actions of this nature in order to undermine the United Kingdom. So, you know, very often you'll see a group that is referred to as, you know, a human rights group or a protest group or whatever it is. And I can tell you from my former job that you know damn well it's not any of those things. It's a proxy for a hostile state.
I know we haven't got you for very long. I want to get into 2 other topics if we could just squeeze those in, because we've got to you a little bit late. But we're told that the Chinese embassy, the super embassy in London, which actually I would be able to virtually see, I think, from outside my window, it was going to be sort of, you know, near Tower Bridge, near, I mean, basically over all the cables going into the city. Some of the US have said this is a crazy thing to allow. It does now look like that actually this Chinese super embassy in the heart of London is going to get approval, and that the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, is going to wave that through, although there's now some talk of a judicial review. But on what planet is this government waving through a clear hostile enemy state from having an embassy at such a prime location in central London, where they could be a danger to our vital communications and security? Why would that be happening?
Look, personally, I think it's daft, and it affects us on 3 different levels. It's a political issue in the sense that the transnational repression, the interference in various community activities that we have here in the UK, freedom of association and so on. We know that the Chinese state has been taking action against, you know, people who speak freely about Hong Kong or Tibet or Xinjiang or whatever. We know that there's a security implication in the sense we know that it could be or will be, there's no could about it, let's be honest, a centre of espionage. And now, third, we know that there's an economic threat, and it's not just the United States. The White House has made a statement, but so have the Dutch and the Swiss parliaments. Now, you know, we want people to use the London markets. We want people to trade on, you know, through the London Clearing House or through the London Stock Exchange. If they're concerned that their transactions are going to be monitored by Beijing, well, guess what? They might find somewhere else.
Yeah, it's that basic, isn't it? Just finally, we're told that at the NATO meeting later this week, there is going to be an agreement from all NATO members, including the UK, to agree to up the budgets for defence to 5% of GDP by 2035. Of course, that will include 3.5% specifically on military. A lot of our money may well be, you know, paying off the Mauritians for the Jagos Islands, and indeed even building a 3rd runway at Heathrow. I'm not quite sure why that counts as part of the defence budget, but do you welcome that, or is it too little, too late?
Well, I mean, I welcome it as a direction. I mean, I would urge it to come quicker. I mean, it does rather feel like we're trying to rearm Britain and asking the enemy to wait. I mean, you do know the enemy gets a vote, don't you? You know the enemy sets the pace. You know, it's rather helpful if we're ready. And we've just had
but presumably, wait a minute, but presumably, according to a lot of people, that enemy will wait until they've got agreement from the UN Security Council before they attack us, so we can all relax, because they would all do it legally.
That's right, Julia. Yes, they'll definitely wait for a UN vote before we see increased numbers of sabotage from Russia against sites in the UK, like we've seen people arrested, increased numbers of Iranian attacks, like we've seen increased repression by the Chinese. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. The reality is we need to increase our spending, sadly. And by the way, it's not just increased spending. We need to rethink our spending as well. We're cutting a hell of a lot of steel in this country when we need to be looking a lot more at technology.
Really good to talk to you. Covered a lot of ground there. Dom Tugendhat, Conservative MP, former Security Minister as well. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm sure they're relieved that there won't be a protest by Palestine Action in Westminster. That's not been allowed. It's been banned by the police, but they're still allowed to carry out protests. We know that's already started in central London, allowed all the way till 3 o'clock. Sam Armstrong, just on that particular issue in terms of the Palestine Action protest, obviously police for any organisation, they're allowed to limit where you can go. One of the things I've always found frustrating is, okay, if you're going to allow, you know, the pro-Palestinian, which is actually anti-Israel, pro-Hamas marches we've had every fortnight in London, do they have to go near synagogues? Do they have to be in central London, down Regent Street, or could they be elsewhere and allow people to go about their daily business on a Saturday afternoon as they would like to? I'm pleased that the police have stepped in at least to limit this and to allow MPs to go about their lawful business and not. The haranguing they get is disgusting. But is it enough?
No, they frankly moved them 100 yards up the road and said you can only do it for 3 hours. If that is the extent of what this country is able to do in this day and age, then perhaps we should be taken over by the Ayatollahs of Tehran. At least
maybe the trains would run on time.
Well, precisely so. This is an organisation that shouldn't even exist. It should have been shut down a very, very, very long time ago when it first started committing rampant criminality all over this country, and we have allowed this organisation to perpetuate, and in so doing we've encouraged it to up the ante further and further and further.
It's not freedom of speech, it involves criminal action. You've got to vote in this country. I was mentioning earlier, people likening this organisation to the right, to what the suffragettes did. Women didn't have a vote and they didn't do anything like this.
We have freedom of speech. Goodness knows that I've worked for an awful long time to defend that right in this country. You've got a freedom to write, to publish, to all of those things. You never have a right to go and destroy other people's property. That isn't speech. It is not a form of expression.
It's called crime for a reason.
Criminality.
It's not even a non-crime hate incident. It's actual crime, the real ones. 12:20 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do give us a call, whatever your views. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Keir Starmer was actively undermining that strategy, because Keir Starmer was wandering around saying, "Oh, you don't need to worry. Donald Trump doesn't mean it. It's just noise. It's just the hawks in Washington just beating the drum. It's not really going to happen." So at the same time that Keir Starmer was basically calling for de-escalation, his words had the practical effect of undermining that strategy. And you can't have the British Prime Minister conducting foreign policy in complete ignorance.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:22 is the time. Let's get to some of your many calls coming in. 0344 499 1000. Having your say on those strikes by US on Iran. We've had lots of different opinions. Let's talk to Natasha. She is in London. Very good afternoon to you, Natasha.
Hello.
Hello. What do you want to say?
Thank you so much for taking my call.
Oh, thank you for calling in.
The reason I'm ringing is because I did actually go and live in Iran for 18 months.
When?
This was about 2010.
Wow, why did you do that?
Because my dad is actually from Iran.
Right.
So my mum's English. So we went to Iran. And regarding what's going on at the moment with the war, what's quite fascinating for me, myself, is that when I went to Iran and I looked at the world map, right? Now, Iran has not included Israel on their world map, right? And at the moment, it's all about Iran wanting to destroy Israel. However, Israel have actually done the people of Iran, the normal everyday people of Iran, a massive favor, because this regime is extremely brutal. The people of Iran have suffered terrible, shockingly, because of the way they've been treated by this regime. And while Israel is bombing Iran, they are bombing targeted. They're not just
this isn't. It's not. They're not bombing hospitals like Iran's doing in Israel.
They're not. And they've even come out and said to the people of Iran that we want to help you.
Yeah.
You know.
What do you think of Donald Trump talking about, not MAGA but MIGA, make Iran great again, and having regime change? What do you think of that?
Well, everybody in Iran and everybody that I know is praying, like literally praying to God that this does actually happen.
Well, aren't you worried at all? I mean, about, what could happen? We saw what happened in Libya, we saw what happened in Iraq and Syria, that actually, be careful what you wish for, some people might say.
Absolutely, I understand that. But the people of Iran, they don't have a voice. For example, if they march in the roads against anything to do with the regime, they simply get shot dead, they get killed, or they disappear. They don't have... they're not allowed to have opinions. They're not allowed to say anything.
So it's kind of like they feel like they've got nothing to lose.
Absolutely. They literally do have nothing to lose. The sanctions have been extremely heavy. A lot of the hospitals in Iran, they don't even have medicine to give people.
Although Iran is, that's the thing, we often hear this, don't we? But actually Iran is allowed to, and has always been allowed to, buy medicines. They just have to, that money can only be used for medicines, but they've chosen not to. Extraordinarily.
It's because of the swift sanctions. There's absolutely no way. There's no way of getting the money. Out.
They are able. No, but they are. There are specific ways in which they're able to get medicines for their people when they choose not to, which tells you everything. Natasha, really interesting call. Thank you very much indeed. It's one of the issues, isn't it, Sam Armstrong? So you think, well, we're told the Iranian people, don't like this regime, but we don't know. We don't have access. They don't only have state-run media. People are protected. The only thing you can think is when a regime is this controlling and repressive, well, they obviously don't think they've got the support of the people. Otherwise, they wouldn't need to be both of those things.
And of course, you only need to look at what Iran is doing over in this country, where the prime targets of its terrorism that its government is conducting on our streets are Iran International, for example, trying to broadcast accurate news back into Iran of what is actually going on in the world. You only need to look at how terrified this regime is of the deposed king, the crown prince, the Shah's son, and how much they hide what he's trying to do away from their people, to know that this is a regime that lives in total and constant fear, not of its enemies, actually, not of Israel, not of the United States, but of the Iranian people themselves.
Indeed, very interesting. Yeah, well, let's go to another call, actually. Mel, she is in Plymouth, and Mel, you're actually from Iran yourself.
Yes, I am. Hi.
Hello. Thank you very much for calling in. What do you make of this debate?
Well, I have just come back, actually, from Iran.
Yeah.
Actually thinking that when I was there, I was just executed. But
so you live here in Britain?
I've been here for 50 years, yes. I married an Englishman. And
And you felt it was safe to go back? Because, I mean, the warning has really been that even if you're like a dual national, like that Britain can't defend you, as we saw with Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe.
Absolutely. But it was just sort of like, I haven't been for a while. I was worried about my friends' family, they were all right. But I can assure you, Julia, and when they say 90% of people, they take this regime, and I'm not exaggerating, people are being suffocated, they're being hostage by this regime, and they are sort of like very clever people. And they don't deserve this.
It's a very highly educated population, isn't it? And again, it was very Western until the 79 revolution, and then things just changed. In terms of women, when you're there, and how women are treated. I mean, we've seen these amazing, incredibly brave demonstrations and protests by young women removing their headscarves, and some women being beaten, some women even being, not just imprisoned, but murdered behind bars. What do you feel like when you're there as a woman?
Well, I can assure you, the girls, they become so impertinent now because people on their motorbike, they were sort of going with their cameras and taking photos of this girl if they had no hijabs. And 90% of girls, they had no hijabs on their head. And if they were sort of confronted by these motorists, and they would say, do you want to take a photo of me? Come on then. Come
Really?
on.
Are they just totally, I don't care anymore, I'm done?
That's it. And people, they just hate this regime. People of Iran, they love Donald Trump.
Really? Do you think, when I spoke to a guest earlier, I don't know if you heard Thomas Farsi and others, and another caller who's saying, look, this was an illegal, unprovoked attack by the US and indeed by Israel previously on Iran. What do you say to that?
I just think that they need to go and see the mullahs first. Everything that they the human rights, what is agreement, what they have done during the revolution.
They're defending something they don't understand. We'll have to leave it there, Mel. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. It was a fascinating call. Mel in Plymouth there. She's from Iran. Has lived here 50 years. Apologies for the quality of that line, but I thought worth persevering. Great to hear you. If we can try and squeeze another call in the next half hour, I'll do my very best. 0344 499 1000. Lots more top guests to come. First up, though, the reunion of the century is just around the corner, and we are giving you a chance to win a pair of tickets to Oasis in Manchester on July the 19th. Yeah, you heard that right. Oasis Live 25 is long sold out, but talk can get you in. And that's not all. Alongside the tickets, we'll put you up for a night in a hotel and put $5,000 in your back pocket. That's completely tax-free. Listen up right now for everything you need to know and how to enter.
All right, kid, you have to be over 8.
Oh, back to me. Apparently, you can't hear the details of that clip. Right, we'll play you the competition in a few moments' time when we do actually have it. We'll go to a quick break first of all, and then hopefully we'll be able to play that competition so you don't have to miss out on that incredible opportunity. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, you did actually hear the competition if you're on the radio. Sorry, on the television. I'm sure we'll give you the details of that if you want to get those tickets to Oasis and with $5,000 in your pocket and a hotel for the night as well to watch the gig. Well, the gigs of the century, apparently. Then you'll hear more details on that later on in Ian Collins' show. Right now, let's talk about big events that took place last Friday. And that, of course, that vote in the House of Commons passing the bill for assisted dying. It's a bill that contains an awful lot of controversy, even for people like me who are in favour in principle of assisted dying. I'd love to have a law for that, but I want a heck of a lot of safeguards to protect people who might be vulnerable to influence or coercion or simply not feel they've got anything left to live for because no one is helping them, including the NHS with palliative care if they're dying. But that bill did pass. and there's been quite a lot of concern about whether or not it's actually going to become law. Reform UK have said quite categorically their manifesto for 2029 election will be clear that they will repeal this law. It's not due to come into place until 2029. But right now that bill is going to go through the House of Lords. So many peers saying that they are going to do their best to take action against that bill in the House of Lords. Well, let's talk about this with former Conservative MP Nick Fletcher, who joins us. A very good afternoon, apologies to you, Nick.
Afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. Now, you are very concerned about sort of what you've called state-sponsored suicide, as some are calling it. We've had some debates about, the principle, debates about the practicalities, the safeguards, even the cost. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, has said, look, the NHS are going to have to make cuts elsewhere to pay for the cost of dealing with assisted suicide cases. It could be, up to £1 billion that needs to be spent, 15 grand plus per person. What are your main objections to MPs voting this bill through?
Well, first and foremost, it goes against all my Christian beliefs, and I believe we still live in a Christian country, so I think they should actually account for something. But it's the first time that us as a nation, as individuals, we're going to actually have to choose whether we want to live or die. We've never had that burden before, and you're going to get an awful lot of people there coming towards the end of their days, and they're actually going to feel that burden. And when people talk about coercion, it'll be coercion from themselves. Do I actually want to put my family through this? Can I leave them some money? Can I do this? Can I take this away? And this is going to be tragic. It really is. And as I say, it fundamentally changes the way that we look at our years. We've got to choose to live, which we've never had to do before. And I think it's disgraceful. And I'm so disappointed and upset about what happened last week. I mean, decriminalising abortion at the beginning of the week.
Yeah, I was upset by that. But here's the thing. You say this is your Christian beliefs. I'm an atheist. I actively don't want people with religious views to have any say over what I and my family can do. I really object to that. Although we have a Judeo-Christian country and constitutionally a Christian country, I get that. But I find it, I don't think I should have to impose my views on how you live your life, and I don't want you to be able to impose your views on how I live my life.
The state is imposing its views on how I've got to live my life now. It's now making me choose. But it's
an easy choice for you. You wouldn't go for it. But I certainly know that my family, my parents, my husband and myself, we have discuss this and what we would want. We may change our minds when the time comes, that we would like the right to choose our own death. And there are lots of reasons why people might say, I don't want to be, living with dementia for 10 years in a care home. I don't want to be, living in a wheelchair or whatever. Now, my view was that bill, that it both went too far. It didn't have the safeguards I wanted. It didn't go far enough, because I would extend it to people who felt their pain or their disability was intolerable. But I want safeguards galore. I mean, absolutely galore. And I thought this bill was completely wrong. I thought the way it was pushed through by Ken Leadbeater in the committee was completely wrong, and I would say downright immoral as well. But it's a debate people have, and you say we're going to have to choose to live or die for the first time. People already do that. People do take their lives, and medics do knowingly give drugs to people which they know will kill them. It's happening. Isn't it better that we do it openly?
No, because this bill actually endorses suicide. I spent much of my time when I was down in Parliament dealing with the fact that 14 men a day are actually taking their lives. And I know 3 to 4 women are taking their lives every day as well. It's a huge amount of people that are doing it. And this actually endorses it. Almost says that suicide is dignified. It's terrible, this thing. Life is precious. And we should be doing everything that we can to protect it and preserve it. This is a terrible, terrible bill. It was a terrible thing for Parliament.
What if someone's life isn't precious? What if somebody, I had a grandmother who spent 25 years with dementia. There's no sodding way I'm going to A, want to live like that myself, B, impose that on my husband, C, impose that on my daughter. I don't think that would be a precious life. That wouldn't be a life that was worthwhile to me. And I would certainly at that point, I think, choose to take my life. And I would like the right to do that and to be helped to do that in a dignified way at a time of my choosing with my family. But I don't think that this law would help that situation. I think my concern about this law would be that vulnerable people who are not getting the adequate care that they need near the end of their life, who are without financial help, without family, or with family that are pressuring them, could be coerced, could be pressured, could feel I've got no one to help me.
You're never going to take that away, though. You can't take that away when you put a bill like this in. And I found
you're saying there's no safeguard that could prevent that?
No, there's no safeguard. And when I was in Parliament, I found out that the poor bills are all the ones that came and so many different lists and so many different amendments, and it's because the poor bills, it's because we're trying to do something that fundamentally goes against what we all are as individuals, which is human beings and supposedly decent human beings. And this is where, and you've spoken there about dementia, you've spoken there about chronic illnesses, and this is my other concern about this bill. It will change over time, and not only that,
the slippery slope.
People do not realise what these statutory instruments are, how easy these Henry VIII powers are.
Yeah, just explain that, because the health, as a part of this bill, the health secretary gets sort of the right to sort of wave a magic wand and change the rules and the safeguards at any time at his own will.
At any time at his own will, and it doesn't go to the House. It goes into a committee room where a dozen or so MPs have been picked. And that's what usually happens. They're actually picked. So they're only going to pick people who are actually for this bill.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And you have MPs in there who've got a huge amount of casework to do, a huge amount of studying to do. They get put in these bills. And it's almost a rush to get in and a rush to get out of these committees. They don't want to be there. They've got so much constituency work to do, so many things to do. And then these Henry VIII powers are going to be able to make fundamental changes to this bill. And when I did a speech on this in Parliament, I spoke of a young lady, 29, in the Netherlands, took her own life because of mental health issues, against all her family's wishes. And this is what I've been trying to say to people. If you turn up at a hospital one day and you find out that your son or daughter has taken their own life because of mental health issues, and you've had no say in it, you've not been able to do anything about it, and they turn up there, and a 28 or a 29-year-old has taken their own life and is state-sponsored, I've been asking people to write to their MPs to tell them to stop this bill. I'm telling you now, when this happens in 10 years' time, and I'll take no pleasure, no joy in saying I told you so.
Yeah. Oh no,
I've writing to MPs.
I think from this lecture, I would like to think, but I understood your point in terms of, is there any way of writing this law where you don't end up with that, as you're saying? But certainly this legislation, I think is an abomination, and we will absolutely live to regret it. But it's interesting to see how much the laws can change it. Nick Fletcher, it's been really interesting to talk to you as former Conservative MP. Really appreciate that. Sam Armstrong in the studio talking about... it's very interesting that he comes from like a Christian perspective, religious perspective, totally opposed to suicide, of any, suicide and assisted suicide. I come from a very different perspective, and I want this, if necessary, for me and my family. But we're both opposed to the same bill.
Yeah, and you've got every reason to. I mean, just take this one simple fact about this bill, which is if you are an 18-year-old girl with anorexia, under this bill, can you kill yourself on the NHS without telling your family? The answer is yes.
And they only have to be 51%. I found this mind-blowing. They only have to be 51% sure that you actually do want to kill yourself. 51%?
Yeah, and by the way...
I'm thinking 90 plus, yeah? Would be reasonable?
And by the way, if you don't get a yes from the first doctor, you can go and see another doctor, and another doctor, and another doctor.
And we know that when they have these panels, they're not judge-led because there weren't enough judges, there wasn't the funding, and of course, you wouldn't even get into a court in time if you had 6 months to live, if that was the criteria, which unlikely is going to change, that they... the panel would be made up by, like, abortion clinics. You don't have people working in abortion clinics who don't agree with abortion. So it's going to be people who agree with assisted suicide.
And it's only going to expand more and more and more over time. There is some suggestion that we're probably going to have to extend it, even though this law is drawn at present to 18-year-olds. Human rights laws mean we may have to bring it forward even earlier. for those people. And look how it works in practice. In Oregon, the state where this is based on, the state in America that's legalised assisted dying is based on, do people kill themselves there for anorexia? Yes. Do people kill themselves there for diabetes? Or in one case, a hernia? Yes. And the majority of people who kill themselves there, only 30% say they're in any pain whatsoever. The majority of people who kill themselves there do it to avoid being a burden on others. That breaks my heart.
Yeah, and what we need to stop that burden, that's people feeling that they're a burden, but also the palliative care. There are a lot of people representing palliative care, doctors and workers, pointing out that we don't have the funds for that. What we need to just fund that so people at their end-of-life care, they're getting the care that they need. People particularly who are alone, increasingly isolated people, people living alone, family members who are busy with their own kids on the other side of the country, but people are getting the care that they need, which would mean their life did feel like it was worthwhile and they weren't a burden, and then we could help people. And again, I think it's such a difficult balance, but this bill, A, isn't the way to do it. It's got no safeguards. I thought the way Kim Ledby to push it through was immoral, absolutely immoral. I'm amazed that MPs voted for it. There's this idea, well, it'll never happen if we don't vote for it now. But this should be something that should be an election manifesto, or even a national debate, a referendum. But he also the idea that doctors could suggest it. I don't want a doctor suggesting that to anybody. I want people to go, if that's something that they're looking into. I worry about private organisations for profit getting involved. We see that in other countries as well. It seems to me that it's something that I philosophically, in principle, agree with very, very fundamentally, and it's something that I would like for myself and my own family. But we need to have, the safeguards need to be so huge and strong and wide that maybe it's not even tenable to put it in without having those safeguards.
Well, especially when we see that provision for people at the end of their lives in this country is appalling. It is an abomination. Hospices are almost entirely charity funded, so that means if you live in a relatively wealthy area... Which again,
in itself is obscene.
If you live in a relatively wealthy area, you're going to have good provision. If you live in many of the places our listeners are in the north of England, in the Midlands, etc., provision is very patchy. And so you are going to be a burden on your family. You aren't going to get the best care provided, the best pain management.
How much can the House of Lords, they're going to be looking at this a lot, some peers in the House of Lords are saying, look, we're going to do our best to sort of scupper it, to change it, to put in safeguards. Now, part of their job in the Lords is to review and improve legislation. You've got expertise, you've got medical professionals, scientists and others and the like. But they also could technically block this, couldn't it? It's not a manifesto commitment. It's a private member's bill. It doesn't have official government support. It was a free vote. But also, crucially, it's not a budget a bill. In which case, we've got the Salisbury Convention dating back over 100 years. Where tough. You don't like it, the Lords, but there's a mandate for it. They could actually stop this bill, could they not?
Do you know what? It's a bold prediction, but my prediction is this bill won't become law.
It's reform. Get in then.
It's got a very tough timetable. So for this bill to come law, it must happen before the next King's Speech, or Keir Starmer will have to give it time. If I was a betting man, I think the peers are going to block it by delaying it. Keir Starmer is going to say howls of outrage. They're going to be bad peers. We're going to push ahead with kicking out the hereditaries in there, and we're going to put this issue to a royal commission and spend some longer time on it. I think he's going to see it blocked by an enemy that he's quite happy to have.
And again, you saw that
guy.
The poll at the weekend, there's an Ipsos poll that suggested that Reform are now at 34%. They would, on that basis, again, these extrapolating from polls to individual constituencies, not that accurate, but on that basis, should get a majority at the next general election if all things stay the same right now. They've said quite categorically in their manifesto they will overturn this legislation.
This bill faces a huge hurdle to climb. My gut actually is it won't even get that far.
Very interesting. Love to hear your thoughts on this as well. 12:47 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to talk to Carl Hennigan at Oxford University. We're going to talk to him about fat jabs and also maternity units, a massive investigation into safety at maternity units around the country. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Keir Starmer was actively undermining that strategy. Because Keir Starmer was wandering around saying, "Oh, you don't need to worry. Donald Trump doesn't mean it. It's just noise. It's just the hawks in Washington just beating the drum. It's not really going to happen." So at the same time that Keir Starmer was basically calling for de-escalation, his words had the practical effect of undermining that strategy. And you can't have the British Prime Minister conducting foreign policy in complete ignorance.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me, and we're joined right now by Carl Hennigan. He's a professor of evidence-based medicine at the University of Oxford. Very good afternoon to you, Carl.
Afternoon, Julia.
Great to talk to you now. I want to talk to you about fat jabs, but just for up, actually, just the assisted dying conversation we just had. One of the things that Wes Streeting has had to say is that, look, we're going to have to make cuts in other parts of the NHS to pay for assisted dying deaths, because we're looking at 15 grand each minimum for those if this bill does go through. Is that true? Would there have to be cuts?
Yeah, look, I think you can't carry on as healthcare as we are, where we're going to talk about the waitlist drugs, which is going to be billions of pounds. The size of the cake is only so big, and if you have to put your resources into one area, there are unintended consequences where you have to stop doing stuff. And I think, we're about to put 20 billion in, and at some point we're going to have to start having a conversation about what are our priorities, what are we going to do in the NHS, and that means we're going to have to do a lot less of certain things. And one of the key priorities for me would be cancer care, effective cancer care, and effective palliative care, and not focusing on this assisted dying bill, which I think has got lots of huge...
That's very interesting. Well, that's the end of life, but the start of life is also in the news today, with Health Secretary Wes Streeting speaking at the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists World Congress. Sounds very grand. He has said that he's announcing a national investigation into the state of maternity care here in England. He's met with dozens of families who've been bereaved by failings, and he basically says that we need to sort of stop accepting there'll be a certain number of maternal or neonatal deaths. Now, we have been seeing problems in maternity units. Look, one of the big debates over Lucy Letby and her guilt is, this was already a failing maternity unit, and was that the issue? But are we seeing a greater percentage of deaths, a bigger problem in maternity units in English hospitals than in typical, other countries, nearby, in France, in Germany?
I think, look, this has been around for about a decade. You go back to 2015, when we can go back to Morecambe Bay, where there was huge problems there, and a number of them trusts. And now we've got Nottingham, where they're investigating 2,500 babies and potential problems in their birth.
And some who died, and also just some that they were at risk or they've had severe injury.
Yeah, and we've seen a slight increase in the last few years in under 28-day deaths. So things are going in the wrong direction. I think, I entered the NHS 25 years ago. It was a very different proposition to what it was now. Clinicians there seemed to run the whole service, and there was a great issue about placed on competency, safety, and putting the patient first. Over the last 10, 15 years, it seems to be nobody's got their finger on the pulse, nobody's accountable anymore, and nobody says, look, our number one priority is patient safety.
Yeah.
And now
seems like such an obvious thing to state, but...
Yeah, and actually there are so many people involved in healthcare who just actually don't see patients and don't get what it is about.
And that's the thing, you're not... A point I always make to people, you're not just a professor at Oxford University, you also work as a clinician in hospitals, in A&E, you see this. What do you make then? We talked about, cost of palliative care and cancer care, and obviously, to maternity care, a lot that's going to come down to money, which is the number of staff on duty, who's available, is there a doctor available or not when you need them? But we're spending money, it would appear, huge sums of money on weight loss jabs, fat jabs. As of today, GPs on the NHS can prescribe on a mass rollout the Manjaro jab. Some 220,000 severely obese people who regarded as having the greatest need are of BMI of 40 or above will be allowed to receive Manjaro from their doctor over the next 3 years. Is that a good a good spending of our taxes and NHS funding?
So NICE has said this is a phased rollout for the first 3 years. They say it's going to take a decade to get this to everybody who should have it. By then, there'll be no money left in the NHS. But you're saying about 220,000 people, BMI of 40, in 4 comorbidities. But yet out there, there's about estimated 1.5 million people who've been using this drug. So number one, I think we're going to
Everyone I know has been using this drug.
So we're going to see services swamp because people are going to say, well, look, this was £150 to £250, but if I can get it on prescription, it's less than £10. 2 is the training resources for general practice. We're talking about a whole day's training for GPs. Patients have to be seen every month while their medication is titrated, and then a 6-month and 12-month review. So the resource implications are double the cost. So my estimation is just in this initial tranche, you're talking £600 to £700 million. But if you, over the decades, were to get everybody on it who they're promising it to, you're talking about a cost of £10 billion, which is half the NHS budget for drugs. So our approach is completely wrong. While we're not prioritising lifestyle choices, trying to nudge people from childhood and in schools to say, look, we've got to exercise more, eat a few less calories, this approach, again, is going to ensure you cannot see your GP and that services will be...
Because everyone is just booked in for their fat job. But here's the thing again, people say, but this is going to save so much money because there's a cost of obesity when it comes to, diabetes, cancer, heart disease, infirmity, people can't work. If people lose all this weight, if these drugs are so good and we're told so good, they're so risk-free and they're so brilliant, we'll actually save money for the NHS, and that's a good thing. What do you say to that, being, the professor of evidence-based medicine?
So there's no doubt, and you're right, that the problems that ensue from obesity are substantial. Being obese above a BMI above 40 is about equivalent to smoking cigarettes for 20 a day for its consequences. So it's a huge problem. The two issues with these drugs is what we've shown is that once you come off it, if you don't change your lifestyle, you don't actually change the way you exercise and eat, you're going to return to where you were before. The second thing is to say as well, these drugs have a black triangle warning, which means we're still understanding the safety consequences. So anybody who goes on the drug must, if they have an adverse event, use a yellow card system to report it. All health professionals must report any adverse consequences.
And we're not talking just about people having a bit of bad breath and diarrhoea, are we?
No, we're talking about serious pancreatitis. In some cases, we've had reports of people dying. We've got issues about pregnancy where you must use double contraception. So there are loads of consequences. What NICE is going to do here is it's got an evaluation that at 3 years, he's going to try and say, was this good value for the taxpayers? So actually, the answer is, from an evidence-based perspective, we don't really understand what benefits we're going to derive.
But yet there are really clearly beneficial drugs which are not being funded right now, but we're going to throw money at this. It blows my mind, it really does. Carl Hennigan, time is up, unfortunately, but always so good to talk to you. Carl Hennigan, Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine at the University of Oxford. Sam Armstrong, I know you and I differ on this.
We do, and look, I'll confess again, I have taken them before.
Which I just think is absurd. You're very slim and young and healthy.
Look, for me, it was a really clear choice. I wanted to lose a bit of weight. I thought I was looking a bit podgy. It was money that I could spend.
But you weren't expecting anyone else to pay for it.
I wasn't expecting anyone else to pay for it, and that's basically my view on it.
Can't anybody who can afford to get a BMI of 40, they are spending so much money on food and fizzy drinks and God as well. Surely if they just save that money, they can pay for their own jabs.
Well, even for me, it saved me money taking these jabs, actually. I was spending much less than the cost of the drugs in food every month, and I was quite happy to pocket the money.
There we are then. Ian Collins, who is the picture of perfection in a man and therefore, of course, would never need to take these drugs. What do you think about this?
You say that, but what about me Auntie Maureen? I mean, I hadn't seen her for a while, and so she went on the old jabs. She looked like someone had sucked the air out of a bag of frozen peas.
I know so many people.
What are you doing with a vacuum bag?
Our world is full of people.
What's happened to Auntie Maureen?
Taken them, but the evidence.
In Sevenoaks, it's a national sport. By the way. I've got to tell you, it's really
No,
the school run looks very different.
The evidence is really clear that it just goes back on.
Well, yeah, but you can. Is it not meant to be like, I don't know what Sam's experience is, but once you see the results, you go, right, that's how I want to stay. Isn't
well,
that
yeah, but you still have to change the way you eat. Should we talk about something more important? Small matter of World War III, or not, as the case may be.
Indeed. Well, that's an interesting question we're going to pursue on is whether Trump has made the world a safer place. And I'm watching those protests at the weekend, people talking about being on the right side of history while holding a picture of the Ayatollah.
God,
I mean, who are these people, for God's sake?
Well,
Seriously, who are these?
They're the enemy within. They're the useful idiots of our enemies.
And I see
are we the only country, apart from America, we allow this mad